Do you understand me, you pants? Hammer!
Well, folks, at this time we're approximately 90 miles now from Denver. The captain has turned on the seatbelt sign as we make our descent for landing. Please return to your seat. Remain seated with your seatbelt fastened.
Lord Jesus, we pray for Larry. We pray that all the deception that Satan has brought upon him, all the plans of evil that Satan has for him, will be bound in the name of Christ. We know, God, that Satan for a season will keep him on a long leash until he who comes to steal, kill, and destroy, he whom Christ said is a liar and a murderer and has been from the beginning, has him where he wants him. We pray for him. We pray for Boyd. We pray, God, that the Holy Spirit may reveal to them what man's words cannot, and that is the majesty, the awe, the glory, and the love of Jesus Christ.
Ladies and gentlemen, there is the chance of some forecast turbulence. The captain has asked the flight attendants to remain seated for just a few minutes extra. We ask that you remain in your seats as well. Thank you.
And may Larry know that in this room he is loved. He is loved. And Satan, we bind you for the lies you have told this man. We rebuke you for what you have in store for him. And we pray God's grace and mercy upon him. In Jesus' name. Everybody said amen. Amen. Okay, Larry.
Thank you.
Okay.
Ici, laissez toute espérance.
The whole box.
A whole box.
Macanudo bus is going to be here. Ooh, what? 2nd of September. That's a Thursday, so come in and get a free Macanudo cigar. $55.87.
great-grandmother lived in a house that was in the middle of a cemetery, and she was 9 months pregnant, walking home on Halloween. Somebody was hiding behind a tombstone and jumped out and screamed, and it so terrified her that she went into premature labor, and my grandmother was born in the middle of the cemetery on Halloween. My father's name was Beverly Rice, and so his entire life he had to fight because he had a girl's name. And he thought, you know, when I have a son, I'm going to pick the most masculine name I can think of. And because Boyd had the word boy in there, he thought this would make things really easy on me, having a masculine name. But, you know, Boyd Rice, you know. Yeah, that made things real easy for me when I was a kid. I'd always wondered where he came across that, and when I went back to visit the ancestral home of the Rices in North Carolina, where you can stay, it's a bed and breakfast, it's an old log cabin plantation. Went to 2 Rice family cemeteries. There's an old one right next to the plantation, but a few miles away there's a really ancient one. It's so old that some of the stones are just like weird misshapen rocks that don't even have any name on it. But in that old one, I came across the name Boyd, and I'm sure my father visited this place repeatedly as a kid, and there was actually even somebody buried there named Mary Rowland Rice, and my mother's name was Mary Rowland. So I'm also wondering about that. Like, do you meet Mary Rowland and go, Mary Rowland, maybe this should be the next Mary Rowland Rice?
I grew up in this little town called Lemon Grove, California.
I think I knew when I was really young that things were going to be different for me. I just could never see myself participating in the world the way other people did. I remember one morning, I was in the 3rd grade probably, and I was going to school. I happened to look at this guy's window. The curtains were open, and I could see into this guy's house like it was a television set or something. And here was this guy ironing his shirt on an ironing board, and then when he was done with it, he put it on, and then he went out to the kitchen and he made a sandwich and he put it in a paper sack and he put it in an apple and some potato chips. And I was just looking at this, and then the guy, I see him going out the door and he gets in his car and he drives off, and I just kind of thought, is this what this guy does every day? He gets up and he does this stuff and he goes to the same job, and is this what I have to look forward to in the future? I just thought, I'm never going to do that. I always imagined I was going to be like some sort of professional criminal or something. And I made plans to do that. When I was a teenager, I would read all these true crime books, not because I was into mass murders or whatever, but because I wanted to see the tactics and the strategies and see what people did to get away with stuff, or what they did that screwed them up. A lot of my pranks were about that. To me, they're a form of alchemy, where you can completely transmute situations in the real world by altering people's perceptions of what's going on in the real world. And I would like, whenever I could do something like that, whenever an opportunity came up, I would do it, because I thought one of these days I'm going to have to rely on this sort of behavior for survival. Before 7-Eleven was 7-Eleven, they were called Speedy Marts. And I was walking by the trash bin one day, and there was this big cardboard Hostess Twinkie display. And I thought, wow, why are they throwing this out? This is really cool. So I took this thing home, and it kind of took up a lot of room in my room. And eventually there was this little motor that would like go back and forth, so the Twinkie would kind of go like this, or it'd spin around or something. I was playing around with this motor to try and figure out what I could do with it. And if I turned it the direction that it wasn't supposed to go in, it created this frequency that caused your television just to go completely crazy. And so I thought, this is going to be a lot of fun. So like that night, I'm sitting there on the couch, my dad's watching his favorite show, you know, Combat or something, and I screw up the TV reception. He's in his recliner and he gets up and he walks across the room, and as he's leaning down to adjust the settings on the TV, I stopped. It was perfectly normal. So he like goes back, sets down again, and as soon as he sat down, I messed up the picture again. And he again gets up, walks over, and as soon as he leans down, I stop doing it. So it's like I thought, man, I wonder how far this frequency reaches. I wonder if I could like stand outside somebody's house and do this. And we lived in a trailer park at the time, and I could go out at night and you could walk behind all the trailers and just like show up in somebody's yard, and they have sliding glass doors, and I would do this. I would just stand out there and screw up the TV reception until I got up and went over and leaned down to fix it. Then it'd be okay, and the second their ass would touch the seat, I would start it again. I had all sorts of fun with that.
He talked about, amongst other things, talked about Martin Denny and the whole tiki culture that was popular in America in the late 50s and early 60s. And really triggered my interest. After that, I went out and sort of bought some Martin Denny albums and sort of found out a lot about the whole culture.
I think to understand the tiki phenomena, you have to sort of have a feel for the time in which it came about. And it was sort of the late 50s, and at that time it was the height of the Cold War. You'd be doing the duck and cover exercises in school. People had backyard fallout shelters and stuff. And people really just wanted to escape the pressures of the modern world. And it was about the time that Hawaii became a state. People became crazy about Polynesia and exotic things. And it was also following World War II, where all the people in the Pacific Theater brought home exotic things from South Sea Islands. So people were thinking a lot along those lines. And when Trader Vic's and Don the Beachcomber came up with tiki bars, it was like the ideal antidote to the stress of the modern world. It was a place where you could just go and forget about everything of modern life, even if just for the amount of time it took you to drink a Mai Tai. I knew a bunch of families that had backyard tiki gardens where they'd have tiki torches and big tikis and, you know, fake exotica stuff all over. It was a fun thing. It was, I think it was the funnest thing that was going on in those years, because it's like on one level of popular culture, everybody was looking toward the future and space travel and progress and machines that were going to save us from toil. But on the other hand, they were looking toward like some idealized paradise that was free from the stresses of modern living, where there were topless hula maidens who were unburdened by Western morality. You know, there were probably loose women who you could have a drink in a coconut and then go off to the tiki hut and have wild native sex. Some of that is here. There's a topless wahine over there beckoning to you, offering you this bowl of plenty with fruits and an exotic bird on her shoulder. I grew up in Southern California in the late 50s and early 60s, and in San Diego you couldn't escape the tiki thing. It was everywhere. They were selling Hawaiian shirts to kids, Hawaiian shirts and tiki. So I had like a Hawaiian shirt with matching tiki, you know, when I was in second grade or something. And my favorite shows at the time were like Hawaiian Eye, about these private eyes in Hawaii, and Adventures in Paradise, about this guy who had a boat called the Tiki, and he sailed around from exotic port to exotic port getting in adventures and stuff.
Am I hurting you?
No. No, it just feels funny. Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, that's the Joel Grey kind of.
That's the look, yeah. And it's not on top. No. Unless you want it on top.
No.
That looks more perverse.
Yeah, it does. So I used to notice on Dark Shadows, like whenever the days Barnabas Collins was a vampire and he bit women, those are the days they'd always have him wearing all this incredible eye makeup, mascara and stuff.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So he's like some glam vampire. Yeah.
In a lot of ways, I feel like I was born in 1969, because 1969 was the year that everything was happening that was very influential to me. The Satanic Bible came out in 1969. Tiny Tim was still in the charts in 1969. Dark Shadows was a top-rated television show in 1969. 1969, they began the pilot for The Partridge Family, which was originally called Family Business, and it was also the year that the Manson family did the Tate LaBianca murders. I was 13 in 1969. In 1969, Quentin's theme from Dark Shadows was number 13 in the charts on the radio. A magazine came out called Man, Myth, and Magic, a weekly magazine dedicated to the history of the occult. And there were actually ads on television for this where they said, "At last, there is a magazine dedicated to the black arts, voodoo, necromancy, the tarot, witchcraft." There was a billboard for Man, Myth, and Magic as you entered the town of Lemon Grove, California. It's this massive billboard with the first cover of the magazine was this Austin Osman Spare painting of like Baphomet, or of this goat, this satanic Mendes goat. So imagine being alive in 1969 and Tiny Tim is on the radio. You know, you've just got finished watching an episode of Dark Shadows, you're driving out to the coffee shop with your parents, and there's an Austin Osman Spare billboard in Lemon Grove, California. That's when I grew up. That's the year I was born, and this is where I come from. And I think, you know, to understand anything else about me, you've got to understand that. As a 13-year-old, I would go to the library in Lemon Grove, California, and I checked out every book on black magic, every book on the tarot, every book on the history of the occult. I remember watching an episode of Dark Shadows where there was a Jekyll and Hyde character. He was about to take this potion, and he said, "Two natures have always existed in man, one good, the other evil." And before he took this, he said, "Perhaps with this we can bridge the gap in man's divided nature." And something, it's like a portal opened in my soul. And there was another show that was on that year that was a rip-off of Dark Shadows, essentially, from Canada, called Strange Paradise. And Strange Paradise was just more overtly occult, overtly Gnostic in its storyline. It was a soap opera, an occult soap opera, I say the world's first Gnostic soap opera, set on an island called Meljardin, Garden of Evil. And this Garden of Evil was like a microcosm of the earth. And there was a millionaire, a doctor, a lawyer, an artist, a runaway hippie girl, a priest whose faith had lapsed, all these people came together on this island owned by the world's most rich and powerful man. His wife had died, and he was keeping her body frozen in this cryogenic coffin. Every other week, the millionaire Jean-Paul Desmond would look at the camera and say, "On this island, at this time, for all intents and purposes, I am God." And his servant woman would say, "Oh, you're speaking of the devil, master, you're speaking of the devil." And there was this portrait of his ancestor, who she was constantly referring to as Jacques El-Waldemand, was the devil himself. And Jacques El-Waldemand simply means Jack, Lord of the Earth. And Lord of the Earth in Gnostic terms means the demiurge, the kind of Luciferian figure who had created the world. And, you know, I was too young to understand any of this, but I certainly absorbed all of it. And that was absolutely one of my favorite shows, just as Dark Shadows was. And watching both of those things changed my life. Each of these influences I took entirely to heart. And of course in 1969 I never would have dreamed that sometime later I would be on a first name basis with Anton LaVey, Charlie Manson, and Tiny Tim. But I eventually was. And these three men were so dissimilar, but so much alike, so much exactly alike. They were all very stubborn, egocentric, cranky old men who were obsessed with this specific period of their youth that was long since gone and forgotten. You know, Anton was into the singers of his youth. Charlie Manson was more influenced by Bing Crosby than the Beatles. And Tiny Tim was living more kind of like in the late 1800s. When I was a kid, my father hung out with all these outlaw bikers and criminals and people who customized hot rods and stuff. And we were at this biker's house, and the guy appeared to be maybe on LSD or something, but he came over to me and looked very intense, and he had Martin Denny's Exotica album, and he said, "Now Boyd, you've got to listen to this. Listen to the entire side. You've got to listen to it on headphones, because you need the headphones to hear the stereo separation." Says this is the record that can bridge the generation gap, because old people like it, kids like it, everybody likes it because it's the best fucking music on the planet. He said, "You listen to this and you tell me if this isn't the best fucking music on the planet." And this is a guy with like swastika tattoos, Iron Cross tattoos, and this mean ass motherfucker telling me how great Martin Denny is. And he made me sit down and listen to the entire thing on headphones. And, you know, after the first side, he said, "So what do you think?" And I said, this is amazing stuff. He said, "You've got to listen to side two." So I listened to side two. And, you know, it's like I went away thinking, wow, that's amazing music. I've never heard anything like that. So it's like a little while after that, I started getting Martin Denny records from thrift stores. And then sometime in, I think probably it was 1982 maybe, there was an interview with Martin Denny in the newspaper in Los Angeles. They said Martin Denny's still playing every night at this certain hotel in Hawaii. So I was obsessed with Martin Denny, went to Hawaii, I met the guy. He said, "I don't have time to do an interview. I've got to get up really early tomorrow and do this thing." But he stood there in the lobby of this hotel on a Hawaiian island talking to me till like 4 in the morning. We just talked and talked and talked, and he found out I was a musician, and he was saying, "Well, explain what it is you do," and I did, and he was familiar with this kind of stuff. He was familiar with the classical avant-garde poets that did cut up stuff with tapes and stuff, and you know, it was like meeting a kindred spirit. This is bizarre. This is one of my favorite stories, and I tell people, and they don't believe it. But Martin Denny said, a man was staying at that hotel, and he said he was had been swimming off the coast of Italy and lost his keys out of his swim trunks. Then a year later, he was staying at that hotel, and he said, and the man was swimming in that lagoon out there, and he saw something shiny at the bottom of the sand, and he reached down and picked it up. It was the very same ring of keys he had lost a year earlier in Italy, but they were shiny. They'd been made shiny by the sand washing over them for a year's time. He said, "I met this guy, he told me the story,
He showed me the key ring, and they did indeed look very unusual. What are the odds of that? So this was like the ideal Martin Denny Exotica experience. I'm sitting in a hotel in Hawaii, looking out this huge glass window, waves crashing in this little cove, listening to Martin Denny play piano and drinking a tiki drink out of a pineapple. That was another one of those peak experiences where I thought, you know, it's never going to get any better than this right here.
Growing up in like the late 60s, early 70s, I really, really loved Bobby Sherman. All his songs on the radio I thought were fabulous. I wanted to be like Bobby Sherman. He was the first like male to wear these leather choker things, and you could buy them in supermarkets at the time. And I remember I had this brown leather choker that had lighter brown leather stars all around it. People think I'm kidding, but I swear to God it's true. If Charlie Manson did bubblegum pop, he would be Bobby Sherman, because Bobby Sherman was this guy who would write these deeply philosophical songs, but he's aiming for an audience of like 12-year-old girls. He's got a song called Unborn a Lullaby, where he says, "Let your mind be your captain, let your body be your ship. You look for your own heaven, you live in your own hell, and you've got to be your own Jesus." Really Manson-esque lyrics like, "Here you and me make believe the world isn't what we see. Hey, things ain't what they seem, so come into my dream and make believe with me." The thing that got me back into Bobby Sherman is like I saw this Dick Clark 25 Years of Rock and Roll or something, and they showed a little clip of Leslie Gore, and I thought, oh, I've got to watch this, I've got to see Leslie Gore. So I tuned into this thing. When I see Bobby Sherman wearing that choker and singing this song like, "Hey, little woman, please make up your mind. You've got to come into my world and leave your world behind." Now, I thought, this is like the Charlie Manson Cease to Exist song, you know, cease to exist, just come and say you love me. It's like, this is like the bubblegum version of Charlie Manson Cease to Exist.
Did you ever see those photos of Peggy Moffat and people who used to paint the lower eyes way below the eyes, and then they'd fill it in white so their eyes...
Of course, I do that sometimes, where you start at an angle here, and then you fill in the white here, yeah.
Yeah.
I do that a lot.
That's fabulous. Everybody should do that.
Mm-hmm.
The first time I heard about Rudy Gernrich, I was a kid, and my parents were listening to the news on the radio, and they were telling about a woman who was arrested for wearing a topless bathing suit. And it was designed by this famous designer named Rudy Gernrich. And I was really young, but I made a mental note of that, Rudy Gernrich. And I would see him pop up in Time or Newsweek or things every now and then. He designed these bizarre futuristic fashions. And he did this thing at the height of the anti-war movement, at the height of the peace movement. He did this really militaristic line of clothing where it looked like military uniforms, and the models walked down the catwalks carrying rifles. And this was like right at the time of the Kent State shooting. So this line was euphemistically called Rudy's back to school line. And I actually have a couple pieces from Rudy's back to school line that I've acquired over the years. That one. And this one. I always really liked this guy, and he did stuff in the 60s that people would only really wear right now. He did like see-through clothing in the 60s. He had this unisex line where the men's and women's outfits would be the same, and you had to wear them with a shaved head and shaved eyebrows. And it was obviously a huge influence on David Bowie.
Did you ever wear makeup in the 70s?
Yeah. When I went to Aragi's English Disco.
Today we place a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame for Rodney Bingenheimer.
I'd like to thank some of the people from out of town. From Colorado, Boyd Rice is here.
Everybody talked about the sexual revolution in the 60s. Now everybody was having sex with everybody and all this stuff. And I think certain people were, but I don't think it filtered down to the mainstream.
The closest we got to it was driving up to Hollywood, going to Rodney Bingenheimer's English discotheque.
This was like a lot of teenagers having decadent, wild, crazy sex.
For a kid from the suburbs of San Diego to come to Hollywood and see this decadent Fellini-esque place, it's like I just wanted to move to Hollywood and live off the Sunset Strip and go to Rodney's English Disco, you know, every night. There were scantily clad women. There were women wearing see-through glitter tops.
The women would look like absolute whores, and they were absolute whores. So it was great. It was like a Sodom and Gomorrah. If you look like David Bowie or Iggy Pop or one of the New York Dolls, it's like the women were all over you. Women, I mean, they were like teenage girls. It was just ultra decadent. Like there was a huge poster of Mick Jagger, and you could see his crotch, and there were like 20 lipstick marks on Mick Jagger's crotch.
Over the years, I'd see Rodney, you know, he's like a fixture on the Sunset Strip, and I'd see him at the record swap meet at the Capitol Records building they used to have back in the late 70s, and I'd see him all the time. I mean, he'd been on the Sunset Strip since the Manson era. He was friends with Charlie Manson, and Manson used to call him little brother, and Charlie Manson and Rodney would go to Cantor's late at night and eat at the same booth where me and Giddle ate with Rodney Bingenheimer last night. So it's great to finally know Rodney's been like an inspiration to me over the years.
I'll have to close tonight with doing that.
Somebody today looking back at the glam era, they can't tell how really strange it was then. It was a very small subculture. There was like not a lot of people into it in the United States. So if you were part of it, you had a feeling that you were part of a very small elite group that was into stuff that nobody else was interested in. In fact, most other people hated it. They didn't understand it. The really exciting thing to happen in the early 70s, the only redeeming thing culturally was Clockwork Orange by Stanley Kubrick, because it was fabulous, and it coincided with glam rock. It coincided with Alice Cooper and David Bowie. Me and a lot of the people I know, a lot of people who I respect, sort of grew up on that stuff. Like Doug Pierce from Death in June was totally into David Bowie. It's like we're exactly the same age. We have all the same influences. We were both exposed to the Beatles, to David Bowie.
This is Mount McGill High School, where Boyd Rice and I went in the early 70s.
Oh, at Mount McGill High School, it was such a crazy mixture of different kind of people from different places. A lot of Hispanic, a lot of blacks. Hispanics and the blacks had gangs. They fought constantly. There were weapons at school. There were fights every day, and Of course, there was the social cliques like the football players and the cheerleaders, and Boyd was different, you know. He had long blue hair.
I knew people who got the shit kicked out of them for walking down the street, you know, looking like one of the New York Dolls or something. I got the shit kicked out of me for going to high school dressed like the New York Dolls and wearing platforms and stuff. But it was good. It was good. It, you know, it taught me a lot about humanity. It's like, you know, people are assholes.
He made up some posters about the principal of the high school,
petitioning to allow torture in the school by this particular principal. And we plastered that school. We went there late one night and like put them up everywhere.
Actually, they're very, very well done. It was before the days of Photoshop, so he obviously spent a lot of time on them, but they were kind of the Nazi hunter, you know, fugitive Nazi flyers that had pictures of the principal in a Nazi uniform when he was younger, and all this information about, if you've seen him, you know, he was last seen in Lemon Grove, California, and, you know, what's his name, the big Nazi hunter is looking for him. There's a significant reward if you turn this guy in, and they were actually very well done, and he posted them all over school. He posted them all over town, actually.
I remember when Boyd took wood shop, only because I think he had to take something in a certain category, so he said he didn't want to take wood shop, but he did. I guess it was better than auto mechanics.
Everyone had to have a yearly or semester project. Most guys would make, you know, an end table or a magazine rack or, you know, something. Boyd decided to make a full-size crucifixion cross.
In shop, in high school, when you wanted to do a project, you'd have to draw a diagram of what you wanted to do and give the dimensions and everything. So I proposed doing this cross that was 6 feet by 9 feet. And the guy looked at it, and the cross, it's a Christian symbol, it's, you know, he approved it.
Well, the teacher misread the inch sign for the foot sign and okayed Boyd to make a nice little crucifix to hang on the wall.
I thought it was perfectly innocent. And then when I brought in the pieces of wood, he said, "What are those big pieces of wood for?" And I said, "They're for the cross I want to do." And he said, "But I thought it was going to be a little bitty cross, not a great big cross." And this, for some reason, infuriated this guy. And every time he'd walk by and see me working on this thing, he'd just repeat, "I was sure it was going to be a little bitty cross."
He had enlisted 6 or 7 guys to help carry this cross, and he laid on it and strapped himself to it somehow, and we all carried him out the school past the principal's office and out to get the cross home. Somehow I think he made the cross so it disassembled in the middle, got it home and put it in his bedroom. And I remember for the next couple years, or as long as I knew Boyd, if you'd go to visit him in his house, this cross went from one corner of the room up to the other corner and then kind of stuck across the middle. So everything he did, he lived around this cross for the next 2 years. You'd walk over it and climb over it, and, you know, he'd hang his clothes on it and sleep under it.
We went to school together. We worked after school together at Taco Bell.
All of our friends worked at Taco Bell. There's about 7 or 8 of us. Boyd and I usually worked the night shift because we were guys, and the girls didn't usually work the night shifts. When he took the orders, he would stand in front of the window with the customer, facing the customer, and it was at night. We had these bright fluorescent lights. There was always a moth or two flickering around the light. And Boyd would love to, as he was taking the order, without skipping a beat, he would grab a moth, pop it in his mouth, and swallow it. And the customers would just, they didn't know what to do. Most of them wouldn't say anything because they didn't believe that they saw it. Some of them would say, "Did you just eat a moth?" And Boyd would say, "No, of course not. That's crazy. I wouldn't eat a moth." But he did that on a regular basis, which is always good for a few laughs. He said he liked, we asked him, "Well, you know, how is that eating a moth?" Because we had no idea. He said it felt kind of good, kind of neat, fluttering down his throat as he swallowed it.
We'd make fake dishes, like we made this really horrible dish called the bean kracher, and we made the signs like Taco Bell where it's phonetically, you know, they tell what the thing is, like they used to have enchilada and they'd say enchilada, so you'd know how to pronounce these difficult words like taco and burrito. But the bean kracher had no vowels. It was like QHR, QH something, and we had it so it was so cheap that it was such a deal. They were half the price of everything to begin with, but if you bought one, you'd get one free or something. So these people say, I think I'll try this new dish, the bean cake. I can't pronounce that. I'd say bean kerchacher. They'd go, yeah, one of those.
And what we do is take one of the cardboard go boxes that you could put like a dozen tacos in, and Boyd would just pile the food right in on the cardboard box.
2 tortillas, a bed of lettuce with a lot of salt, a couple little scoops of beans, and then so they kind of look breast-like, and then an olive slice on top of each of the things of beans. Then we put some sauce over it. And it was very, people would always get that. They get the bargain. Yeah, I'll have 4 of those. And then they get partway through the first one. They'd come up and I'll have a large soda. That's kind of dry.
Taco Bell's back then had big fire rings out front where they would burn a fire, and they were gas fires. And one evening, I think we had just started working, Boyd and I got the garbage bags that we would put in the outside trash cans, which are big 50-gallon clear garbage bags, and turned the fire off, turned the gas back on, and held the bags over the gas and filled them all up, and let about 10 or 15 of them float up over Lemon Grove. And they actually looked pretty cool when they were up about 1,000 or 2,000 feet. It looked like a group of hovering craft of some sort up there. And the next day, I know in the local Lemon Grove paper, there were several sightings of UFOs that evening hovering over Lemon Grove.
In the mid-'70s, I was doing a lot of work with photography, and I came up with a process whereby I could make photographs of things that didn't exist. And they look very real. They're totally abstract. Some of them look more real than others, but people can't believe when you show them a photograph and they say, what is this? You'd say, well, it doesn't really exist. They'll say, well, how could you make a photograph of something that doesn't exist? I had a show of these photographs in the early 80s in San Diego, the Pink and Pearl Gallery. And a guy came who had been a photographer for Life magazine for 50 years. So he'd retired, and he could not figure out. He said, if my life depended on it, I could not figure out how you were able to make these photographs. And I refused to reveal the method to him. I haven't revealed the method to anybody. So, after I die, there'll be this enigma that lives on. Like, how did he do that? The strange thing about this Cocteau bust is, for like maybe 10 years, probably more than 10 years, there was a photograph of this bust in a book about, coffee table book about the art of Arno Breker, and I really loved this photo of Cocteau. So I had it enlarged and I had it hanging in my bedroom. It was the only thing that was in my bedroom wall for years and years. A few years back I used to tell people that Jean Cocteau was my patron saint, because I felt a real spiritual connection to him. And when I was really deep into the Grail research stuff, I would be pondering certain things, and before I went to sleep at night, I would talk to the portrait of Jean Cocteau in my room. And I would say, Jean, visit me in my dreams tonight and show me some good stuff. And I would go to sleep and have dreams where I would be like in some bizarre fun house, and I'd run into Jean Cocteau. And he would say, go up those stairs over there and you'll find out what you want to know. And I would go up these stairs and find some amazing thing that would be utterly symbolic, and I would wake up and have the answer to what I wanted to know. Very early on, I met Captain Beefheart. I met him once, and he, for the rest of his life, would call me maybe once a year, every 2 years. It'd be like middle of the night, the phone would ring, and I'd pick it up, and I'd say, hello? I'm thinking, who's calling at this hour, for Christ's sake? And I'd say, hello, and he'd say, Boyd, it's Don. I'd say, Don, what the hell are you doing? I'm living in a trailer in the middle of Death Valley. He said something that made a huge impression on me. He said, if you want to be a different fish, get out of the school. I love Trout Mask Replica, It had a massive influence on me. I mean, when I was into Dada and I heard Trout Mask Replica, I thought, this is Dada. If there was Dada music, this is it. I only really started learning the moment I dropped out of high school. I never learned anything in school, really, except, reading, writing, arithmetic. But as soon as I dropped out of school, I began going to the library and began pursuing stuff that I was curious about, like art and the occult and things like that. I remember I went to a girlfriend's house. She wasn't home. I stopped in this bookstore and picked up this book about Dada and Surrealism. I was really interested in certain of these people like Max Ernst, Marcel Duchamp. And Duchamp, particularly because he wasn't even like an artist per se. He was more like an alchemist, where his real motivation was like changing perception or transmuting things, taking one thing and making it into something else. So I was really interested in that, and those guys really inspired me. There was a Man Ray portrait of all the surrealists, and the guy that jumped out at me was Yves Tanguy, a famous photograph of him with his hair standing on end. He just looked sort of crazy. And I thought, oh my God, these people lived in the 20s, and they were able to make careers not despite being weirdos and outsiders, but because they were weirdos and outsiders. They used it to their advantage. Because I'd always thought, you know, it's like I'd have to be a bank robber or a criminal or something. This girl wrote the word Krishna on the lemon. So every news thing mentioned Hare Krishnas, and they actually went down to the Krishna temple and interviewed the head of it. He said, we know nothing about this. It was undoubtedly the work of some very unprincipled people. They got like a group of Southeast Asian immigrants to repaint the lemon. Even though it was just hairspray, they could have washed it right off. Every time anything went wrong in Lemon Grove, California, I would be called down to Lemon Grove Sheriff's Substation. And the officer there hated me, because I was always doing stuff that he felt was just really intrinsically wrong, but it wasn't quite illegal enough for them to be able to bring charges against me. And the fact that I got, you know, girls to do my bidding for me, they were like seeing me as like the Charlie Manson of Lemon Grove or something, and these girls' parents would come in and say, can't you do something about these horrible boys, Boyd Rice and his friend? That our girls are always up to all sorts of mischief. And no, can't do anything until they break the law. I remember when I was very young, this is probably 1968 or something, there was a police gazette that had Tiny Tim on the cover, and there was an article about Tiny Tim, Salvador Dali, and Andy Warhol. And it was called Women Like It Weird. And it was about how if you're an artist, you get to be utterly eccentric, you get like women like you can live your life by a different set of morals and ethical codes, and you can just like ignore stuff that everybody has to follow in lockstep. And you know, I remember even then I was thinking, well, this sounds pretty good to me. It's like the artist was like the bohemian guy who's drinking wine and hanging out in the beatnik coffee houses and stuff. So when I got into the early European art movements, this was something that, you know, it's like, oh yeah, that's right. The artist gets to live it up and, you know, throw paint on a naked lady and push her body against a canvas and say this is art because I'm saying it's art. And I wanted to make things that were kind of like very open-ended, where it's like not me imposing content in the art, but just something that would be like a Rorschach test, where you could look at it and different people would see different things. And that's sort of what I tried to do with my music. But I think with these black and white paintings, you know, I was very successful in that because it looks like something, and there's depth and texture, but you know, some people look at these things and see skulls. Some people look at these things and see naked ladies or erect penises. It's like, and then, you know, the idea of something being many different things at once. It's like paintings like this. If you look at this for a couple weeks and you get used to it, you don't stop seeing new stuff in it. You can just turn it upside down. You have a brand new painting. Then if you get tired of that, you can turn it sideways, then turn that thing upside down. And I think that this was something that I was very much preoccupied with in those days, is like having one thing and having it be many different things at the same time. So this thing hit the newspapers all over the country. And I didn't see it, but people said the lead story on Walter Cronkite was that this crazy young man who was thought to have escaped from a mental institution tried to give this, and they changed it into a skinned goat's head. So it sounds more satanic, more evil. So this was like the top story on the news all over the country. I had a lot of time on my hands when I was a teenager, and I heard Betty Ford was coming to town to open her husband's campaign headquarters. And I thought, well, there's got to be something fun I can do to coincide with this. So I'd always seen these skinned sheep's heads in the store, and they were hideous looking. They had eyeballs, their tongue was hanging out the side of the mouth, you could see their teeth. And I couldn't believe that people actually ate these things, and I always thought there's got to be something funny you can do with that. So when Betty Ford's coming to town, I think, okay, I'm going to get a big sandwich sign and mount one of those things on there. Then I'll have like a spoon on one side and a fork on the other side, and I'll write some inane slogan. So I show up at this place, and there are all these anti-abortion protesters who have pictures of like burned, mutilated fetuses. And I stand right next to these people, and people are looking at the fetus pictures, and they're looking at the skinned sheep's head, and they somehow think I'm part of the abortion protest. Betty Ford shows up. She walks past us all. She has a pair of giant scissors she cuts this ribbon with, and then she's whisked off by the Secret Service. And I thought, well, that was a bit anticlimactic. So I'm going through downtown, and I see this traffic jam and all these crowds of people, and it's Betty Ford appearing at the Senior Citizen Center. And so I get out, park the car. There's like a big line of people, and they're all having bouquets of flowers to give to the First Lady. And I thought, God, I wish I'd had something I brought to give to her. And then I thought, well, I got the skinned sheep's head right in the car trunk. So I got it out, and I moved through the crowd. It was like hundreds of people. But as I tapped them on the shoulder and they saw this skinned sheep's head, they just parted like the Red Seas. And want to get away from the thing. So I got to the point where Betty Ford was just that far away from me, as far as you are. The Secret Service guy looks over, and he like comes and he grabs me by the arm, and he says, you know, what is that? And I said, it's a skinned sheep's head. And he said, what are you doing with it? I said, I was going to give it to Betty Ford. And he said, I don't think so. And he like wrenched my arm behind my back and led me away and put handcuffs on me. They were searching my car. Some lunatic comes out of the crowd and said, he had a knife. I saw him earlier with a knife. You know, like, what? I didn't have a knife. Had a little plastic spoon and fork. But, you know, anyway, they threw me in the car and took me downtown. So they held me for hours. They held me till the sun was going down. And at some point in the middle of the whole thing, one guy was saying, so this guy's driving a Mazda RX-3, huh? And he said, yeah. And he said, well, what's the name of that other guy, that the Hirohito sniper guy, who he was driving a Mazda RX-3? What was that guy's name? And I said, Vince Broche. And they look at me and they go, yeah, his name was Vince Broche. How do you know? Well, it just so happens I knew this guy. We were in the same photography class. We were dating the same girl at the same time. And he one day stopped and was just hanging out on a bridge watching the sunset. And these cops came up and they said, what are you doing? And he said, I'm just here watching the sunset. They said, oh yeah? You don't happen to know by any chance that this is the route that Emperor Hirohito's motorcade is going to take in a few minutes, do you? He said, no, I didn't know. They said, well, where's your car? And he said, right over there. And they said, can we look at it? They opened the trunk, and there's a rifle in the back with like a sniper's sight on it. And they thought this guy was trying to assassinate Emperor Hirohito. And he had no idea. Had no intention of taking a pot shot at the emperor. But it's just made me look even more guilty in the police's eyes. It's like, how come this guy knows the Hirohito shooter? You know, there's got to be some weird connection.
I am Robert Lopez. I do the character known as Elvez, the Mexican Elvis. And I met Boyd in 1976, I believe, when I was in a band called the Zeros. Some called us the Mexican Ramones. He was a friend of Javier Escovedo, who was the guitar and lead singer of the Zeros. And at that point, I was about 16 or maybe 17. I was infatuated with the Dada movement. Boyd was attracted to me because he knew about that. But he was the only person I knew who was living the art of that. One of the things that Boyd was doing at this time, he had a magazine called the BOYD Journal, and it was just a newsprint paper folded, multi-pages with nothing on it at all. And when he would leave these at laundromats or at coffee shops or places where the weeklies were, and this was like in '76, so it was something different for that time. At that point, he used to have a friend named Steve Hitchcock, who went by the moniker Shitcock.
My name is Ferrara Brainpan, and I moved up to San Francisco 14 years ago. I lived in San Diego for 14 years before that, and at that time my name was Stephen Hitchcock, and one of the first people I met in San Diego, when I moved there in 1976, I actually met him in '77, was Boyd Rice. I was looking for artists to produce this Dada zine, writers, artists, poets. The ad came out on a Thursday, and the third person that called me that day that the ad came out, as I recall, was Boyd. Boyd was made the strongest impression on me of probably any of the people that I've known, in terms of somebody with a very independent thought and a thoroughly iconoclastic attitude.
I often think about there's weird little synchronicities that happened to me that at one point or another that changed the entire course of my life. And you know, one of them was going into a store where a guy mentioned Steve Hitchcock's ad.
Boyd was someone who introduced me to the idea of the alchemy of thought, whereby you take a negative or valueless proposition and turn it to your own advantage by sort of inverting the perspective on it, you know, which can be done if you're I think it takes a disciplined mind, a disciplined mentality to make use of that, but it's certainly a valid principle.
I just happened to be driving by his house and, you know, and meeting him, and he kind of introduced me to all those people in the art world. It's where I first found out about people like Genesis P. Orridge and Richard Kirk. I met the people of World Imitation, who had a band called Monitor, and I met them, and it was just like we'd known each other forever. It's like I'd mention Annette Funicello, and they'd say, "You're into Annette? We're into Annette too." I'd mention Martin Denny, and they'd say, "You know about Martin Denny?" So it was like meeting these people was like a breath of fresh air, and I met them at exactly the right time. And I'd published the newspaper article about when I gave Betty Ford the goat's head, and they'd seen this magazine, and that was the only thing they liked in the magazine. So they contacted me, sent me some of these magazines they were putting out, which were just mind-blowingly good, and it was like nothing I'd ever seen before. It was like immediate, it was fun, but it was very, very strange stuff. Those people turned out to be very valuable at that point in my life. And, you know, meeting Genesis for the first time, I remember going back to his house and playing him some early tapes of Non. And he just listened in silence for a long time. And then he looked at me and he said, "This is very interesting. It's very, very industrial." I thought, wow.
I think it was around the same time that he was planning the 60th anniversary of the founding of Dadaism or something. He was doing an event at a little record store in La Mesa, California, the La Mesa Music Machine, and I think that was in planning at the time that he read my ad. And Boyd was probably 19 and I was 18. He was a minister in the Universal Life Church, I think. He married a young woman to a record album, a vinyl record album. It was Chuck Berry's 1 Dozen Berries. He officiated and read the Holy Vows of Matrimony. She got in the limousine with the Chuck Berry record album.
I'd gone to San Francisco to meet the Bay Area Dadaists, Bill Gaglione and Anna Banana and the rest of them. And I was there for a week or something. They said, "Well, we're doing these performances at La Mamel. Do you have something you want to do?" So I came up with something, and then it's like frequently after that I would fly up every few months or something and do a performance at La Mamel. And Zeb was one of the first people I met there, and for whatever reason he took an interest in what I was doing. We seemed to be on the same frequency.
Once you discovered Dada, it was like that was it. You know, that was like home, that was like the font where, you know, you realize like this is where it's at, this is, you know, we will just keep, you know, this tradition, you know, working in this tradition. It was just like, you know, the happening thing.
We did a lot of performances, and Zeb was around there all the time, and he was the guy who first told me I should put out a record.
I hooked Boyd up with the pressing plant.
And this was, you know, before punk had happened, before the whole do-it-yourself movement. And it had never occurred to me that you could just go to a record company, give them money, and they would press up copies of your record. So, you know, it's like, from that day forward, I just thought, okay, I'm going to save up money and I'm going to put out my own record. And then when people see the music on a record, it will be a reality for them. And it actually worked out quite well because, you know, I went to England, sold a handful of copies, maybe like 30 copies or something to Rough Trade in England. And those 30 copies ended up in the hands of the most influential people in the music business that day. Is like one went to John Savage. I've heard from experimental musicians who just like went in a mainstream record shop and they saw this album that was absolutely black, had no title, had no printing of any kind, and they just thought, what could this possibly be? What would music sound like on an album that is entirely black? So these people bought it and it was incredibly influential to them, and some of these people went on to be really successful avant-garde musicians who are still performing today. One person who got a copy was Daniel Miller from Mute Records, and as I left London, Daniel said, you know, I really like your record. I'm thinking of starting up a record company. Would you like me to re-release it in England? And, you know, of course. So I was the first artist signed to Mute Records, and I'm still with them nearly 30 years later. Genesis P-Org got a copy of that. My favorite artist at the time, named Armand, who was one of the new realists, he got a copy.
Those early non-records are like, they're so beautiful. The Black Album, for example, is so exquisitely beautiful. This stuff came from nowhere. There's nothing he was basing his non-music on. There's absolutely nothing like that. I would doubt very seriously if Eno was even an influence. You know, I kind of don't think so. I just can't even imagine that. I know that he was fascinated with trying to figure out how Boyd did what he did, but I don't think that he was an influence on Boyd. I think he was fascinated by Boyd because he was maybe a little threatened by Boyd.
After the glam era ended, it seemed like there's nothing interesting going on in popular culture. It was just all disco and stuff. And I think that's when people like us started thinking, you know, maybe this is, instead of like being interested in things coming from the outside, maybe this is like the vacuum, the void. And it was like an arid wasteland out there in pop culture. So I think this is when people like us started thinking, you know, maybe we should do our own music. So it's like me and a lot of people I know began doing our own music, and then it was way before punk, but when the advent of punk happened, we thought, okay, this is an in. This is something where nobody really understands what all this is about or what the defining element is. So we can just like go in here, we'll have these venues to play, and you know, that's certainly what I did. I was never interested in punk rock at all. And I think, you know, punk really was, in the early days, it was really just a recapitulation of glam rock, because it was glammy, had a harder edge maybe. Some of it didn't though. A lot of that glam stuff, like the sweet and stuff, has a really hard edge to it. Even Gary Glitter, it has more of a hard edge than a lot of the punk stuff had. And it was supposed to be rebellious, but people who were outsiders working in that milieu essentially looked at it and said, this is supposed to be about rebellion, but it's the same basic chords that we used to compose Louie Louie. This is just rock and roll. It's like if these people were really rebellious, they would take the entire musical form and rethink it and redefine it and reinvent it. And I mean, that's certainly during those years, that's what I thought I was doing.
Boyd and I actually did some musical collaboration. It was my idea to form a band, and Robert Terman jumped into the game around the time Boyd came up with the name Non.
Saxophone and a girl singer wasn't quite the way to go for us. So me and Boyd started doing stuff together and hanging out all the time. One thing led to another. And that's how Non started.
Boyd talks about it in the Industrial Culture book. He describes it pretty accurately, where nobody really knew what they wanted to do or wanted to take authority to tell anybody else. So I kind of dropped out, and he and Robert Sherman became Non. Their first record was that 7-inch knife ladder that with the two holes in the center.
The off-center thing and the multi-speed thing was I'd go over to my cousin's house as a youngster, and I would play their Johnny Cash singles off-center. So it'd be like, I hear that train rolling down the track, and I loved it. I thought, wow, this is a new way to listen to Johnny Cash. And then, I'd play it at all different speeds, and they'd say, don't do that, you're going to break the record, you're going to break the record. I just thought that's ridiculous. At the time I got the idea for pagan music, I got the idea years before I actually did it, but I'd mentioned to people that this was my intention. I was going to put out a record of loop grooves. And at that time I was taken very seriously by the legit art world, and I just came back across this magazine that was put out by the Los Angeles Institute of Contemporary Art, and there was this music news section, and the first thing in it was Philip Glass plays with the Philharmonic in London or something. The second item was like musician Boyd Rice is going to put out a record entirely of loop grooves. It'll have a second hole for off-axis play, and you can play it at any of 4 different speeds. And I think I was inspired to do that simply because John Cage had said, oh, I hate making records because it's such a fixed medium. And I thought, nothing in the world is fixed. If I take a rock and set it in the middle of a table, I can look at it from this direction, or I can look at it from that direction. You can look at it from any number of perspectives, and you'll see something completely different. And that's sort of the approach I had to life back in those days, is that, there was all these options and possibilities. As soon as I thought of doing tape loops, which I thought I'd invented, I was really sad to find out that people had been doing tape loops for ages, but I thought, well, there's got to be a way to make a record of just loops, because every record has the grooves that go towards the center, and then they close off in a loop. And I used to like to just listen to that, the runoff groove in the record, where I'd leave the needle in there and just turn the sound up as loud as I could. And after a while, you can hear all these little variations and subtleties of sound, and there's always the place where they lock it off, where you hear this thump. So it'd be like... So I liked that. So it just seemed to me a really obvious idea, but it was hard as hell to get this done. I sent off to record pressing plants all over the country, and I talked to them on the phone, people in West Virginia. They'd say, yeah, we can do that. I'd send them specific instructions, and they'd send the tapes back and say, there's no way we can do this. It's a physical impossibility. And I finally had to get the president of a record pressing plant here in Hollywood to come in and go in and master this thing and just physically show the guy how it was done. And then when it came time to re-release, sometime in the 90s, re-release Pagan Music, and again, I went along to the studio to have this thing mastered, and they said, no, we can't do that. And I had to take their hands and lead them over there and say, you know the thing you do at the end of the record where you make it stop going forward and it just goes in a... That's what you need to do, but 17 times.
This is where Boyd used to live. His room was up top, and I believe right behind that window is the kitchen where he was drilling records once when I came over. He had a phone book sitting there with a bunch of holes in it, and what he had been doing is placing his pagan music record on these phone books and drilling through them. The second hole, which is the alternate hole on those. So those are all hand drilled by Boyd with a power drill in his mom's kitchen.
When pagan music finally came out, I went to London and I brought boxes of these things, and I wasn't allowed into England, and I was sent to Dusseldorf to stay with their plan. And they had a record distribution network set up, so they bought a bunch of copies of pagan music, and literally about a week later, pagan music was in the top 10 in the Berlin alternative charts, in this music paper that was distributed all throughout Germany. And then I was called in Dusseldorf and interviewed by Chris Bond, and by the time I get to England, finally, I'm in New NME, New Musical Express, or Sounds or something, and there are all these things about how I put out a record of loop grooves. And then it's like about a week later, in the national press, serious mainstream press, had an article with me on like maybe the 4th page or something saying, eccentric American musician Boyd Rice has just put out the world's weirdest record.
Right here is where Abbey Road used to be, and it was after 3 punk rock shows, the very first punk rock shows, that they got moved here for the summer of '78. Once a week, it used to be a teen disco called Abbey Road, and it was just because it was cheap rent and it was vacant on one night a week, so we had the run of it. This is where the first non-gig was, with the Zeros, the Deadbeats, and for our Brain Pans outfit called Young Americans. And it was right here, and it's kind of ironic what it is now, given that this is where first non-gig was. The first non-show, it was just Boyd and Robert switching switches on boxes and pressing buttons on tape recorders, and unbelievably loud volume. It was deafening. As a teenager, I used to I'd be in the front row or against the barricades, against the stage. It shows Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple when they had the Guinness Book of World Records, and Deep Purple had the Guinness Book of World Records for being the world's loudest rock band. I was front and center at the show here. It was my very first concert, and I can tell you that they were not nearly as loud as Non. And that's the only basis of comparison I have. Though they're louder than the world's loudest rock band.
He was interested in things, in making sound, which I think was one of the things that I also really liked about him, and Zev too. What I liked about Zev is that their music was more about sound and than it was necessarily like song.
I kind of think of it, it's like you're like standing like next to like a jet engine, but I always like to stay the entire time, because I had this weird thing that would happen in my head when I would listen to Boyd's music. After a long time, it somehow would click something in my brain, like some kind of chemical would change, and all of a sudden I would get all these like really great ideas. You know, I would think of all these things that otherwise I never would have thought of. So I really loved Boyd's music for that, and I would stay the entire time and listen to the whole thing.
Me and some friends went up to LA to see this concert, and on the way to the concert we saw this place called Kelbo's Hawaiian Barbecue. I think for me one of the most spectacular things about Kelbo's was you would go in, you'd have to wait to be seated, and you were by this massive wall made out of lucite with all these things sort of embedded in glass. There was like a gun, there was lipstick, there was like little bird toys, there was even like a couple fried eggs. All this incongruous stuff that had absolutely nothing to do with the tiki bar. And it was overwhelming. It's like one of the best pieces of art I've ever seen. We walked in and it was completely dark, and there were lamps made out of pufferfish that had colored light bulbs inside. I mean, it was just like a phantasmagoria. It was like totally fake, and yet it was totally evocative. There was a napkin that had the guy bowling with a coconut, and there was this little sign that's incomprehensible. It said something like "Idi Wabimbiad" or something. And I say to the waitress, you know, what does this mean? And she says, well, if I tell you what it means, will you buy me a drink? And I said, yeah, of course. She said, that's what it means, if I tell you what it means. So it's like I knew when I did a tiki bar, we had to put that sign up. That got me re-inspired back into the whole tiki thing again. So it's like I met these people in LA who were also into tiki, people like Jeffrey Valance and the World Imitation Group.
We all got together with Boyd and Tom Griswold and World Imitation and Jeffrey, and we put together this huge party in Venice, California. And we called it the Pet Party, and the theme was pets. You had to dress as your favorite pet or just something to do with pets. But on the flyer, for some reason, it says no pets allowed, so people weren't allowed to bring their animals. And we invited all the trendy hipsters, you know, of the era, the punk rockers, you know, all kinds of celebrities showed up. And the theme turned out to really be, oh well, tiki. So we had a big, you know, like a erupting volcano on stage, and tiki gods and nets full of shells and Annette music playing and Dick Dale. And we were so excited because like Darby Crash showed up, and Tomato, the Screamers came, and people from Slash magazine and Gary Panter came, and
all the cool people from LA came to this party, and virtually overnight there was this resurgence of interest in tiki culture.
I remember the first time we played with Non, Boyd had this guitar called the Roto guitar, I think it was called, and it had a little metal 50s metal fan attached to the guitar, and you'd turn it on and the fan would hit the strings.
What the Roto guitar was, it was a guitar with a fan, like under the strings. And this metal fan that would spin around at an incredible rate of speed and just scrape these strings, which are round guitar strings. It just makes a searing cacophony. It's an incredible sound. It really did sound like a flight of B-17s exploding, you know, like in your head. And it was just like they're all like taking off with all the bombs exploding in the bomb bays, and everyone screaming and glass breaking, and the whole, it was just great. It was like, you know, it was like 12 o'clock high on DMT. It really did sound insane. Like maybe if you were inside the cable of the cables of the Bay Bridge, you know, in a windstorm where they would snap, you know, just that kind of sound, except just amplified, but you know, and multiplied. It was crazy.
whiskey show where there was a little doll on a chair, or a dummy, I think it was. He was never on stage at all. It was just the sounds and that doll just sitting there. It was pretty cool.
It was probably sometime in 1978 when I decided to move to San Francisco, because I'd been there on and off, and I had all these good connections there, and I lived there for a short while. And I thought we'd taken on as far as we could in a place like San Diego, and some place like San Francisco there'd be more opportunities.
Okay, I'll introduce myself. We'll take it from there. I'm Jim Morton. I was the editor of Incredibly Strange Films, which Boyd worked on as my co-editor. I met Boyd through research. I had been doing a little newsletter called Trashola, which was about weird films, because I didn't think they were really getting their due, all those oddball films out there. And I had spent most of my formative years hanging out in movie theaters. So I had started doing this little newsletter, and then research contacted me, and they came over and they started talking about Boyd pretty quickly. I showed them Incredibly Strange Creatures Who Stopped Living and Became Mixed Up Zombies, and they said, "Oh, you know, we know this guy named Boyd Rice who's been telling us about this film for years."
I think I must have been 16. I was not at all prepared for what I saw, because this movie is from 1963 or something. Bright, lurid Technicolor colors, a lot of go-go girls. It was claimed to be the first monster musical. So it was like this story about this psychotic guy who's hypnotized by a gypsy, but it's interspliced with go-go girls dancing and stuff. As the movie unfolded before me, I just thought, this is the best movie I've ever seen in my life. And it changed my life. We started working on this book, and we were looking around for some of these people, and some of them are hard as hell to find. And somehow Jim Morton tracked down George Morgan, who was the producer of all Steckler's films. So I called up George Morgan, who was living in Pasadena, and did an interview with him. And I said, you know, by the way, whatever happened to this strange actor, Cash Flagg? And George Morgan says, well, don't you know that Cash Flagg is Ray Dennis Steckler? That's like his acting name. He acts in these films, but he's also the director.
Boyd Rice is my biggest fan and devoted fan.
And it was like an epiphany. It's like, my favorite movie director is also my favorite actor of all times. Because I thought Cash Flagg is like the real James Dean.
I think Boyd really wanted to be Cash Flagg. He wanted to be Jerry from The Creatures. I met so many people who want to be Jerry, because Jerry was an independent person. He did his own things.
He's not like the dreamy outsider. He's the outsider who's like a little bit weird. The girl's parents might be scared if you brought Cash Flagg home. And Steckler thought that I wanted to be Cash Flagg. And, you know, I thought I was Cash Flagg. It's like, I saw that movie and I identified with this guy so much. And then when I talked to Steckler on the phone, I identified with him so much, because he was like this outsider in Hollywood who insisted on doing things exactly his way. And if you wouldn't do things exactly his way, he'd just like say, okay, fine, you know, and leave. Ed Wood, you know, he probably never would have dreamed in a million years there would be a Hollywood movie made about him. I thought, you know, it's like some of these people you repopularize, like Steckler or Martin Denny or something, to actually like be in your golden years and see this resurgence of people who genuinely appreciate what you're doing, and like finally after all these years get some modicum of respect. And you know, it's like, I thought that was great. The only things I saw for decades probably that had the same initial gut impact on me that the Creatures did when I was 16 were Scopatone music videos. There were these music jukeboxes in the 60s called Scopatone machines. And this guy, Jack Stevenson, we went over to his house, and he travels around the world showing old educational films and industrial films and things like that, like films about rats, the scourge of mankind. If you see one, there's 1,000 more that are waiting unseen in the shadows to destroy civilization. So he's showing us all these great films. He says, you know, I've got these weird music videos. You guys might not be into them. I don't know. And he said, well, will you show us. And he puts this thing on, and it's like, immediately I'm hypnotized. It's like some 60s futuristic German airport, and workmen are bringing out these gigantic crates and set them in the middle of the airport. And suddenly the crates explode, and when the smoke clears, there are these two German twins called the Kessler twins. They've got elaborate hairdos and look-alike outfits. They're doing these synchronized dances, and every time it cuts from one scene to another, they've got different elaborate hairdos, different outfits, and they're doing different synchronized dances. And they do this song that is it's the most bland song on earth, Quando, Quando, Quando. But to see the Kessler sisters doing, the Kessler twins doing Quando, 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 this was like a religious experience for me. And then it's like the next one was another thing. It's like eye-popping colors, scantily clad girls doing go-go dances, like close-ups of just their tits shaking for like a few seconds too long. And he'd get through with one reel and say, yeah, I don't know if you guys are into seeing any more of these. Yes, please, as many more as you have. We saw all of his Scopatones, and I was just going around for weeks saying, I've seen these amazing things called Scopatones, and the colors are like eye-popping, and there are these girls dancing, and people would look at me like I was crazy. It's like the true mystical experience which transcends words. We both felt like born-again Christians or something. We were so excited by these things. We tried to tell people about it, and you can't really convey in mere words like what it's like seeing a bunch of go-go dancers wearing brightly colored, scanty outfits and really groovy music and stuff. But it definitely changed my life for the better. And, you know, he showed us a reel, and he said, you know, I don't know if you guys want to see any more of these. I've got more. And we said, yeah, we put on another one. And I think after that, we had him put on another one, and it's just like, I felt like the feeling you have when you fall in love or something. I was walking around for a week just going, I can't believe I saw those amazing music videos at Jack's house. But then to find out, after many, many years, that Ray Dennis Steckler filmed a lot of these Scopatones, it's just like, why am I not surprised?
I probably did about 40 or 50 different ones for the Scopatone market, the foreign market, and of course most of them I've seen on MTV through the years on the classics.
These Scopatones are so much like the Creatures. They have all the elements with the girls doing the dances and the bright colors.
Mankind is aweary of its sham prophets, its demagogues, and its statesmen. It crieth out for kings and heroes. It demands a nobility that cannot be hired with money, like slaves or beasts of burden. The world awaits the coming of mighty men of valor, great destroyers of all that is vile, angels of death. We are sick unto nausea of the good Lord Jesus, terror-stricken under the executive of priest, mob, and proconsul. We are tired to death of equality. Gods are at a discount. Devils are in demand. He who would rule the coming age must be hard, cruel, and deliberately intrepid. For softness assails not successfully the idols of the multitude. Those idols must be smashed into fragments, burnt into ashes, and that cannot be done by the gospel of love.
Living in San Francisco, I just felt it was inevitable that eventually our paths would cross. I mean, San Francisco's more like a small town than a big city. Every once in a while we would drive past a black house or something, and I'd say, is that where Anton LaVey lives? Is that the Church of Satan? And people would say, oh no, that's down in the avenues, and you know, Anton LaVey doesn't really see people anymore. He just hangs out with millionaires and movie stars, and they'll fly him to Europe to do a ritual for them or something, and he'll come back, but he never goes out of his house, really. When I met Jim Osborne, the cartoon artist, Jim had been part of LaVey's inner circle in the 60s, or he'd been a close friend of LaVey's, spent a lot of time there. And I found this out, and I said, so, you know, what's Anton LaVey like? And he was telling me stories about LaVey, and he said LaVey had been a hypnotist, and his wife Diane frequently annoyed him. So he placed her in this hypnotic trance where if he said some post-hypnotic phrase, just some weird meaningless little sentence, she would immediately stop talking, get up, walk out of the room, go into the bedroom, lay down on the bed, and sleep until he came into the room, said another sentence, and snapped his fingers. To me, this is just like something out of Dark Shadows. Then I thought, okay, now I really want to meet Anton LaVey.
One thing that Dr. LaVey and I really enjoyed after dinner was to go haunting used bookstores. They're wonderful bookstores in San Francisco. So we ran across this great book published by a publisher called Research, Incredibly Strange Films. This is something that Anton LaVey had had a passion for most of his life. Opened it up, and here was Russ Meyer and Ray Dennis Steckler and all these great people that he himself had admired. He said, who are these people? I need to talk to these people. Who else knows about these great films? So we contacted the publishers, V. Vale and Andrea Juno, and we had a meeting with them. But it came clear very soon that they really didn't have an idea about what they had actually published. And we said, well, who actually wrote this book? Who is responsible for this book? And they said, oh, you want to talk to Boyd Rice. It was amazing. As soon as they met, I could tell that it was going to be a rich relationship, because Boyd comported himself very well. He was this tall, thin young man, and with these glistening eyes. Anachronistic, I think, is a word that I would use for the first impression of him. And as I got to know him later, I understood where that came from. He really has the soul of a poet warrior. Not lost in this time, but definitely moving through it and using his pitchfork to prod people and gore the sacred cows. So I can understand why he would be an admirer of Anton LaVey for as long as he had before he ever met him. I understand that he had a picture of him up on his bedroom wall when he was a child, but he was attracted to the doctor's outrageousness as well as his authenticity, his authentic voice in recognizing human foibles and being able to so cuttingly use people's fears to accentuate their own vulnerability. Great admirer of humanity, but understanding that the role of the devil has to be the trickster, has to be the one who prods and pokes and challenges. And so Boyd was right there. He really understood it. He understood Satanism intuitively from the very beginning, that it is both social outrage in using the term Satan, you know, the dreaded S word, and the black candles, and the mystery, and the ancient wise ones, and conjuring forth that within ourself, which ties into the ancient ways, darkness, the black capes. But there's always that carny element of it, you know, that gaudy trickster, the barker, you know, beckoning you to come and waste your 25 cents looking at cute girls shaking around on the midway, you know, and that's part of it too. And Anton LaVey understood that, and that was one element that he did not want to lose. He didn't want to lose either one of those in Satanism. There were people that came to him that were understanding of the black candles and the mystery and what the satanic archetype was about, but they didn't understand the gaudy, in-your-face, trickster aspects of it. And Boyd Rice was able to understand both of those, being the prankster that he already was, and a born Satanist.
One of my all-time favorite books, a book that I consider to be a huge influence on me and my life and just sort of the way that I look at the world, is a book by Terry Southern called The Magic Christian. For those who aren't familiar with it, the book is about a man named Guy Grand who is a multi-millionaire, has so much money that money is no object, and the whole course of the book is his a detailing of these elaborate schemes that he involves himself in with the sole purpose of just fucking with people's shit, you know. And the thing that he keeps saying in the book is he's making it hot for them being the suckers of the world, the dullards, the idiots, the fools. And of course that applies to Boyd perfectly, is, you know, that's what he's always been about, is just sort of making it hot for them.
I want to talk about Blinky the Friendly Hand, and we're at the LA Pet Cemetery, and in 1978 I went to Ralph's supermarket and bought a frozen chicken in a plastic bag and brought it to the LA Pet Cemetery to see if I could bury it as a pet. And I went through all the rituals and so forth, got a coffin and a headstone, and that was in 1978. And then in 1988 I got this idea to do another Blinky piece, and then I was thinking of what to do. And I thought, well, what I should do is like literally resurrect Blinky, which means to exhume Blinky. So I hired a lawyer and a doctor, and we were going to do an autopsy on Blinky. So anyway, the day comes where Blinky's going to be exhumed, and I'm out here at the pet cemetery, and of all the people to show up, Boyd showed up at the exhumation. It was so weird because, you know, I mean, hardly anyone knew of this, and Boyd comes dressed like Barnabas Collins, and he's sort of posing at the grave while Blinky's being exhumed. And it was really horrible when Blinky was exhumed because the water table at the pet cemetery is real high, so by the time they got to the coffin it was all water and mud, so when they pulled it up it was this oozing muddy, like it was like horror, you know, to see Blinky came up and you open the coffin and it's just muck with a few bones like floating around, but there's Boyd you know, posing really happy. And it was funny later, I heard that the people at the pet cemetery thought we were filming like some kind of rock video. I guess because Boyd was all dressed in black and he had his cane and he had those fake vampire teeth on, and it looked like totally cool. And it made sense that he's like standing over the exhumed coffin of Blinky. One time I visited Boyd when he lived in San Francisco, and at that time he lived in a coffin. You know, he had a coffin in the middle of the room that he slept in. Another aspect to Boyd's personality that Dr. LaVey really understood, they had a meeting of minds about, was the whole vampire aesthetic, because Boyd in his youth had been exposed, as so many of us were, to the television show Dark Shadows, and it was an occult soap opera of all things, but it had vampires and werewolves and witches and history and dark castles and storms. And it was just something for us. It was just scintillating and exciting. And so Boyd really vibrated even then as a child to the character of Barnabas Collins. And either when we met him or soon thereafter, he acquired this wonderful cane that was a duplicate of the wolf's head cane that Barnabas Collins always carried with him, the vampire character in the show. And I think Boyd understood within that the aspects of the romance, the cultured gentleman of the vampire, and how it
sometimes tentatively covers the facade of the feral human just below the surface, the ripping and rending and the tearing apart of the veneer of civility.
Boyd did fuck my mother with me in the next room on several occasions. And I was awake to bear audible witness to it. There were plenty of lustful sighs and moans coming from the other room. That was, I think that was when they were in their heyday. They were living it up, having fun. Wild kids. He's all around. He's, I mean, one of the greatest guys ever. That's ever going to exist. And I know my grandfather felt the same way.
Boyd was working as a security guard around that time, and he was seeing a woman named Beth Love at that time, who is probably one of the best artists in America today.
I've always kind of been in contact with Boyd on and off. He's so much fun to talk to on the phone. You know, to me it's a relief to be around people who, you know, you can talk about anything. You know, he's very intelligent, and I like people who really think who not only think outside the box, but who think outside of the entire packaging industry. And Boyd is one of these people. He's a really fun guy. You know, he's nice, he's personable, he's loads of fun. And to this day, I don't think I've had a better dates with anyone else. It was the most fun date, you know. He was working at the time as a security guard. It was just so sexy and so hot to go places in this cop car and make out with this grating behind you, you know, and it's like making out with a cop or something. It was just hot, you know, and he's like tall. He's like the epitome of tall, dark, and handsome.
For maybe about 10 years, I was an alarm agent. I'll tell you what this job was. It's like you dress up like a cop, you wear a sidearm, you drive around in a sort of cop car with a cage in the back and a spotlight on the side. You just drive around the city all night long. If an alarm goes off in a building, they call you and you go and you check and make sure nobody's running away with the store. And if something really dangerous is going on, you call for police backup. And usually the alarms were set off by rats or something. Most of the places I patrolled were located in Chinatown, and every place in Chinatown has rats. In the old days, the Tong used these tunnels under Chinatown to smuggle people and goods and things, and these tunnels are connected to all these places in Chinatown, all the restaurants and everything. There's no way you can seal them up, so there's even the cleanest place in Chinatown. The fanciest restaurant in Chinatown I went to one night, and I get out of the car and I get my big mag light and I shine it through the window, and I see hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of rats running up the stairs into the dining room of this restaurant. Then I looked up a bit higher and held my light up a bit higher, and it was lighting up the dining room, and there were just hundreds of rats darting in every direction, jumping up on the booths. They're like leaping, and you could hear them inside chattering and squeaking, and it was amazing.
He was nocturnal, and he was up in the middle of the night, and he'd come and pick me up, and we'd spend all night riding around. He took me to see Anton LaVey on several occasions.
She was a brilliant artist. Her stuff looked very realistic in an art milieu where a lot of stuff is just utter garbage. I took her to Anton LaVey's house, and she brought a number of her paintings, and he was just blown away. He just kept saying, "This is remarkable. I can't believe that anybody in this day and age takes the time to put in this kind of detail, and, you know, this must have taken you months." And she said, "Yeah, it did." Over the years, I've taken a lot of different women to see LaVey, and it's like the next day I get a phone call from them, and it's always the same thing. Like, after I took Beth over to LaVey's house, she calls up the next day and she said, "Boyd, I had the weirdest dream about Anton LaVey. I dreamed I was having sex with Anton LaVey." And literally to the last one, every single female I've ever taken to Anton LaVey's house calls me up the next day. And it got to the point where I get the call and it's like, Boyd, I had the weirdest dream last night. And I said, what did you dream? That you were having sex with Anton LaVey or something? They go, how did you know? LaVey had all these alter egos and personas and characters he would go into. And he just took great joy in going into these characters, and he would do the whole evening, and it was like you were in the room with a different person. And there was like the film noir crime boss was a favorite one. There was one just called The Chinaman. Sometimes you would be getting ready to leave. You'd been there all night. It's 8 in the morning. You need to go home and go to sleep. And all of a sudden you're talking to the Chinaman. And he's like, oh boy, I have a girlfriend in Lake Tahoe. And Blanche would be the straight man. And it was like, really, you have a girlfriend in Lake Tahoe? And it's like, yes, I visit her and we have sex and then I give her money and I leave. Blanche said, that sounds like a prostitute. No, it's my girlfriend. It's my girlfriend. And he could do this for 2 hours straight. And pretty soon, it's like you would forget you were talking to Anton LaVey. You were talking to the Chinaman. And he would call up sometimes. And the film noir crime boss was the old man. And I just answered I just answered the phone. And okay. I just answered the phone. Hello? Boy. And you say, Boyd, it's the old man. And, oh, yeah, what do you want? I hear these hotshots from New York have been trying to blow smoke up your ass. Well, you just tell them where to go. You know, if you tell them if they have any problems with that, just call the old man. And so I'd go, okay, I understand. Because there are these people who are trying to get me involved in some project he didn't want me to be involved in, and he, I don't know. It's like he had this deal where it's like, you know, never give anybody advice. But I think he thought, like, if it wasn't Anton LaVey giving the advice, if it was the old man, it would be an entirely different thing. And he'd say, if they give you any trouble on this, just pass the buck. It's the oldest thing in the history of humanity. It's the easiest thing to do. Pass the buck. Put all the blame at my door. Just say, the old man tells you to go fuck yourself. And then even to a lesser degree, he had these characters where it's like, I would call up Blanche, and you know, it's like I'd say, so what's the deal tonight? How am I going to dress? Is it like the film noir crime boss meeting tonight, or is it am I meeting the U-boat captain? She'd say, oh, it's the U-boat captain. So I'd dress in black leather and military gear. If it was the crime boss, I would wear, you know, a white dinner jacket, a tie, and slacks. So there was always a theme. It's like when you went to LaVey's house, you were living in an alternate reality. So, you know, the only problem was like getting the alternate realities to interface. So it's like I would fit into his alternate reality, like, you know, like some sort of Westworld type of thing. It's like you don't want to show up dressed like a cowboy when somebody showed up dressed in medieval gear. He was brought up on the Johnson Smith catalog, and he gave a copy of it to me, and it's all just total schadenfreude, just things designed to allow you to take pleasure in the discomfort of others. And the operative word in all the descriptions is consternation, you know. Wait till you see the consternation on your friends' faces when you pop under the table for a few seconds, put on your darky mask, and a Negro comes up in your place. It was all stuff like that, you know. It's like, wait till you see the consternation on your friends' faces when they sit down and it sounds like somebody is cutting the cheese with this new improved whoopee cushion. He loved that stuff. And I went over to his house once, and
we're having a really serious discussion about something, and all of a sudden there's this loud kind of like, and LaVey kind of like smiles for a second and keeps talking, and so I'm looking around and I keep talking, and then it's like there's another fart sound and another one and another one, and he'd been given an electronic whoopee cushion where he had a remote control device and he could push whatever kind of fart sound he wanted. He programmed his entire synthesizer once, in fact, so that every key was a fart sound, and he had them labeled. There was like, you know, librarian fart, big old fat gal fart, and, you know, it's like he had classified farts.
One thing that I credit Boyd Rice with concerning Anton LaVey more than anything was getting Dr. LaVey to sit down and record some of his music. We were privileged to spend long evenings with him at the keyboard, and some of it has been filmed, but it had never been properly recorded. And the doctor said, oh, well, you know, people want to do recordings of me, but they want me to go into a studio and they want me to deal with their keyboards. These are keyboards I've programmed already. I've spent hours and hours programming these keyboards to sound exactly like the instruments that I'm trying to convey. A trumpet sounds like a trumpet, a saxophone sounds like a saxophone. I have all of my theater organs in here, all of my effects. I can't do it anywhere else. I can't go into a studio in the middle of the day and work with some engineer. Boyd said, you don't have to. Doctor, please just set up a tape recorder. Anything, just, it doesn't matter about what the technical end of it is. We just need your music, and if you don't do it, then it will be a loss to all of us. No one else will be able to experience what Blanche and I experience every night when we sit hearing you play for 2 or 3 hours, moving from one so smoothly into the next without ever looking at any sheet music. It was all in his head, things that he'd gathered from, you know, his years in the burlesque and in the circus and in the carnival and working in classical music. And it was just beautiful music, and now it's available to people, and it wouldn't have been had it not been for Boyd insisting that the doctor get it done.
He had started to visit Charlie Manson around that time. He and Manson seemed to get along pretty well.
I was excited by the fact that Black Flag was going to put out this Charlie Manson album, and then I hear they aren't going to do it. So I'd been meaning to contact this guy for years, and I hadn't because I really didn't have anything concrete to say to him. I didn't want to waste his time. So finally I write to him and said, listen, I'm kind of in the music business. If you want to get this album released, I could get it released in a heartbeat by any number of people I know. So he kind of wrote me back and said, okay, yeah, let's talk about this. There's this huge podium with all these cops with guns watching everything everybody does. So I go sit in this area. I'm the only person in there. After what seems like 20 minutes, the door swings open and Charlie Manson comes out. And he's this very small elfin character. And he's looking around going, where am I? Where am I? Then he sees me. They're undoing the handcuffs from behind him, and he comes over and he said, you must be Rice, huh? I said, yeah, good to meet you. I sat down, and he said, you're probably a little nervous, aren't you? You know, and I said, no, I'm not nervous at all. You know, I've been reading about you for years, and it's great to finally meet you. And he said, okay, well, before we get started here, there's one thing you and me got to get straight. There's only one person at this table. I'm sitting here looking at you, and you're sitting there looking at me. But there's only one person, one soul, one mind at this table now. And I'm just thinking, this is just fucking great. It's like, I meet Charlie Manson, you know, 2 minutes ago, and he's already giving me the I am you and you are me routine. So it started off in the best possible way imaginable. At the time, Manson had got the scar on his forehead. He'd done the X, and then he made the X into a swastika, And at about the time I met him, he got the scar turned into a tattoo. So he had this tattoo of a swastika on his forehead. And I said, I love your tattoo. And he said, yeah? Yeah, it's a good tattoo. But it's very heavy. It takes a lot of strength to carry something like this in here. I could easily see how people might have been drawn into this world of his because he was such a realist, but he had one foot in the world of fantasy where he would spin these yarns for you and you could almost imagine they were real. He would say stuff like, you know, Rice, when I get out of here, you and me are going to steal a helicopter. We'll go visit the Ayatollah Khomeini. We'll be treated like kings in Iran. And in the realistic part of my mind, I thought, number one, Charlie's never going to get out of here. Number two, you can't fly a helicopter to Iran. But I'm driving back across the Bay Bridge after that first visit, and in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, oh boy, me and Charlie are going to fly to Iran and visit the Ayatollah Khomeini. So it's like there's this fantasy element where you wanted to believe what he was saying because it was interesting and exciting. And, you know, I was a male adult realist. I was a skeptic. I was a cynic. And there was a part of me that wanted to believe that, even though, you know, in the back of my mind, I never really did. But he could paint pictures where he would just look into your eyes and say, I'm looking behind you right now, Rice. I'm looking behind you and I see a hallway that stretches to eternity. There are thousands of people there hung by the neck. They're wearing Nazi uniforms. And they died. They died for the same dream that I'm living right here, right now. I can see them as far as the eye can see. And in your mind's eye, you can see all that behind you. It was fucking fabulous. Who would love this? It's like, you know, you read about this guy all your life, you want to meet him, and it's like he delivers the goods. On every possible level, he delivers the goods.
Those graveyards are piled up from here to eternity. And that's more than Bing Crosby and Frank Sinatra in Las Vegas playing a nickel on a slot machine, you dig? There's more to it than just numbers and snakes who peer out from their mother's womb who haven't been born yet, wanting to tell somebody what to do or how to do it, you dig? See, here's the thing, some things are for public entertainment. Everything is dead. It all died in the battlefields of honor. The only ones that are worth a fuck are the ones that stood up and fought for you and died for you or gave something to you in wheelchairs or crutches or laid up in some kind of insane asylum in some nut ward or hanging themselves on ventilators.
It was just like, you know, I'd go over there, I'd visit him, and I'd be there for maybe like 8 hours or something. I'd go over early in the morning, I'd leave in the afternoon when the hours were through. And so it's like, in eight hours of talking to Charlie Manson, you get a hell of a lot of stories, and you hear a hell of a lot of stuff that's never been in the books. And there's a hell of a lot of stuff where he'd say, I've been in here all of my life, and I've always known a lot of old men, and the old men I know a lot of secrets, and they know they're going to die soon, so they look around for the young men, and they pick out one, and they say, I'm going to tell you something, but you got to promise not to tell anybody else. And they tell you their secrets. He said, I've been in here my whole life. I've known hundreds of these old men. They all told me their secrets, so I'll tell you a thing or two if you got to promise not to tell anybody. And he told me a bunch of excellent stuff that has come in really, really handy over the years. And I've You know, the old guy's still alive. There are a hell of a lot of stories I could tell if he were dead, but I promised to hold my mud, as they say in prison, and I've done that to this very day. And you know, there's stories I can tell when Charlie Manson is moldering in his grave that I would not tell now, because I gave the guy my word.
Boyd's always been sort of attracted to those people that disrupt society in some way, that cause these, that sort of show the limitations of what we try to pretend is civilized. I wouldn't want to put words into Boyd's mouth, but I know that that's part of what attracts him to a lot of this stuff. And he was visiting Manson on a pretty regular basis until one weekend. He had just done his gun training on the I guess if you're a security guard, every few months or a year or so you have to go and prove you can still shoot a gun. And there was a bullet in one of his pockets that he didn't know about. So when he got to San Quentin and they, you know, had him empty his pockets, there was a bullet. It caused this big hassle. They threw Manson in the solitary confinement for 2 weeks, which, you know, really wasn't Boyd's fault. That was just this prison using any excuse they can to fuck with Manson. But Manson held Boyd personally responsible for that.
You gotta realize, see, we're really deep in darkness, and there's a lot of insanity around these places. You know, it's like, that's what Monahan don't understand. Monahan's an idiot. And so is that stupid fucking Boyd. See, they come in, they get a job, and they walk around in a uniform for 5 or 6 years, and they act like somebody they've seen, or they sing like somebody they heard. In other words, they got a fear-based mentality, man, that it's not based on any comprehension of obeying orders. They don't. Everybody wants to give orders. No one wants to obey and abide by orders. Everybody wants to be the man, but nobody wants to let the man be the man. Well, that's what you just talked to. He wants to chew Boyd's head off because he fucked up. He fucked the main line off of San Quentin. You know how many bastard babies that created so that punk could be a rock and roll singer?
And I had a bullet in my pocket. And nobody believes me. Not a single person I know, not a single friend believes that that was an accident. And Len Fromm didn't even believe it was an accident. But that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Fairly early on, I decided I needed a symbol of some sort that would be an embodiment of my worldview, that would be a symbol for the band. And since on the first non-single I had used the logo with the reversed N, I really liked the look of the reversed N, and I thought it should be something based on that. And so I thought if you stretched out the reversed N and had a line in the middle, that would look really good. I kept drawing it for years, and it didn't really quite look on paper like it looked in my mind. And I toyed around a while with using a cross with 2 bars, and couldn't decide which to use. And at about that time, the Temple of Psychic Youth was happening, and Genesis started using the Psychic Cross. So then it's like the cross with 2 bars looked too much like the Psychic Cross. I eventually hit on the perfect design of the symbol behind me, and was using it for a number of years, assuming that I had just made it up. I didn't know it existed, and it was a very ancient symbol. I first came across it in a book about the SS werewolves. They use the wolf's angle, and that's when I learned the name of it, the wolf's angle. When I found out about runes and I found out the meaning of the wolf's angle, its original meaning was exactly the meaning I had intended for this symbol to convey. It's like the balance point between light and darkness, creation and destruction. And ironically, I later found out that the Cross of Lorraine was also a very ancient symbol, going back to ancient Samaria.
He sent me his token Cross of Lorraine, and along with it, you know, it's obvious I was very touched that that there's this he was wearing it when we met, and obviously when I first started seeing photos of him and stuff from way back when, he was wearing this thing.
And it, amongst alchemists particularly, had precisely the same meaning. So I thought I'd made up both these symbols. They both had existed since the dawn of time, and they both had exactly the meaning that has always been sort of the guiding force in my life. I think Adam Parfrey was the first person who really got me, because I was surrounded with these people who all really, really liked me, but I had a feeling that none of them really understood me. And I just always felt that me and Adam were on the same frequency. It's like we knew all the same points of reference, and we knew how to delve into things that other people would consider dark and have a good time with them, have fun with them. So it was a breath of fresh air to get to know Adam Parfrey, because I'd met him just super briefly at a film showing in San Francisco, and he said, I'm working on this book, and I definitely want to get you involved, because I'm sure you're one of the few people who could add something to this, what my ideas are. And he gave me the book proposal for what would eventually become apocalypse culture, and the first version of it was very, very weird, and I took this thing home and I looked at it, he said Grove Press was going to publish this, and I looked at it and I thought, there's no way on earth anybody's going to publish this thing. You know, this guy might be insane or something.
His initial contribution to apocalypse culture, I think, had to do with astonishing quotes from Adolf Hitler. And Hitler, of course, Time magazine was going to say he was the most influential man of the 20th century, but they took that away. And many people just don't want to admit that. Practically every best-selling book has a swastika or a drop of blood and all that. Now Boyd just comes forward and says, I'm interested in this stuff. And he's not hypocritical about the situation like a lot of the mavens of mass culture. And there's a very, very fascinating, interesting thing. People are obsessed with it. I don't think Boyd's obsessed with it, but he had really unorthodox interest in it, and he explained to me about the Hitler quotes that really seemed astounding and sort of tied in with a lot of the things in the book about the avant-garde art of the 20th century and modernist art movements and other things that seem to be transitioned quite well in the book itself. So I asked him to put those quotes together for the first edition of the book.
A little while after that, I think it was, that the 8888 show occurred, which was at the Strand Theater in San Francisco. He did that with Adam Parfrey, and they showed a Manson movie. It was actually an anniversary of sorts of the Manson murders.
Some author said that 8888, the concert, was the Boston Tea Party of modern Satanism. And it kind of was, because it's like we kind of took these ideas that I'd been into for a long time and formalized them, and for whatever reason, I don't know why, this was like the huge event of the season. We did it at the Strand Theater in San Francisco. There was literally a line of people going all the way around the block, and it was sold out. The theater was packed. And Geraldo Rivera was doing his Satanism special. He got news of this, and he flew an entire camera crew out here to film this thing. LaVey had read me Destruction Ritual. He had originally done on August 8th, 1969. He hated the hippie culture so much, he just describes people who are like drugged up calves waiting to be slaughtered. And he described a scene where something horrible happens to a bunch of these people. And he did it on that night, and like an hour later, Sharon Tate and all her friends were murdered. So we wanted to, at the exact same time of night, do a recapitulation of this, and we did.
If you look at the history of the research books, they're really, through their best period of books, they were exploiting the things that Boyd turned them on to. of course, industrial culture to begin with, but then the Incredibly Strange Films book was a direct product of their association with Boyd. The Pranks book, obviously, because Boyd was a master prankster and still is. The Incredibly Strange Music book, even though it was made long after they had their falling out with him, would not have been made if he hadn't turned them on to so much unusual music. This woman, who shall remain nameless, because I don't want to give her any publicity, this woman came to work with research on assembling videos for research. Research decided to start doing videos. And at one of their screenings, she referred to Boyd as a Nazi. Now, at the time, Boyd was examining kind of that culture in San Francisco, the skinheads and all of this, and suddenly everybody was calling Boyd a Nazi, you know, which was idiotic, because Boyd's not a Nazi, and he never was a Nazi, and he never will be a Nazi. So probably to this day, you'll find people in San Francisco who spout this sort of poppycock. But, you know, they're usually fairly dull-witted people, so I don't really give them much credit.
To me, his whole take on it was more like, you can take it about as seriously as this movie, The Producers, you know. It's like he's a Nazi in a way that Mel Brooks is a Nazi, you know. I mean, it just, I can't take that seriously.
A Nazi. What does that mean? You know? Particularly these days, and now in the 21st century in the US of A, you know? A Nazi. Is he instigating people to start marching and drumming up murderous conduct against minorities or Jews? No. I'm a friend. I'm Jewish. Well, I should look behind my shoulder. There's the ovens of Auschwitz behind me because Boyd Rice is interested in Nazism. I don't know. It's crazy stuff. I never had a personal problem with his interest in these things. I never had a problem with his interest in totalitarian aesthetic. I shared that interest too, particularly at a time when every single piece of modern art had to do with confessional, oh, I'm a poor loser, what can we do about the horrible leaders and blah, blah, blah. It's like this crybaby stuff and the victim culture thing, and we both really didn't care for it. It seemed like not fun, at the very least.
I actually remember this incident, and I'd gotten a number of different stories about it. I didn't know if it was the filmmaker who produced the Pranks video who said this, or some people said Andrea Juno said this, but I think there was a lot of sour grapes with the research people because they just worshipped Anton LaVey. They put him on a pedestal, and I think, you know, at the end of the day they always realized that they really didn't have that much in common with him, and I think they were really jealous of the fact that me and him had become best buddies, and I was going over there on a weekly basis. When this incident happened at the film screening, I kind of thought, well, okay, I've got to nip this in the bud. So I asked Anton LaVey if he knew a lawyer, and he was going through a messy divorce at the time, and he gave me the number of his lawyer. So I go to the lawyer, and I say, listen, these people are going out in public, and they're telling people I'm a Nazi. Can you just send them some cease and desist notice saying, you know, my client doesn't have anything against Jews or Judaism, and, you know, if this is to put you on notice, and if you continue to go out in public saying that my client's an anti-Semite, you know, we'll take you for everything you've got. So this guy says, you know, says, I can write up a letter saying this, this, and this, you know, does that satisfy you? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, give me $75 and you'll satisfy me. So I gave the guy some money. He wrote this letter,
And unfortunately, the people at research were intimately familiar with the name of Anton LaVey's lawyer. So when they got this letter from LaVey's lawyer, they assumed that me and LaVey were in cahoots against them. And they had recorded like 120 hours of interviews with LaVey for this book they were going to put out. And they were advertising, they were doing a documentary about me. So when they got this, Vale hit the ceiling and threw a tantrum and began kicking stuff around the house. And that's when he decided LaVey was like a rotten son of a bitch. And he actually even called him up and left this angry message that LaVey played me. It was quite hilarious. He was like, Anton LaVey, you used to be a really nice guy, and then you fell in with that Boyd Rice character, and now you're this miserable son of a bitch. So they decided not to do the Anton LaVey book. And they decided not to do the Boyd Rice documentary. Things were getting more and more strained between me and Vale, and things were obviously like it was irreparable. And me and Jim had been begging for ages, like, give us back our one-sheets and lobby cards and photos from all these movies. So we made a date to go over there and get this stuff back. And he'd given us most of the stuff back, and I said, well, what about these other things of mine you have? What about, like, the funny Mexican poster from the front of the Pranks book? And he said, you gave that to us. That's our property. I said, why would I give you something that I love so much? It's like you got to use it. And I said, well, what about my ABBA book, that I got from England? He's like, you gave that to me. That was a present. That's mine. I said, I love ABBA. You had no interest in ABBA. Why would I give you my ABBA book? He opened a drawer, got out his gun, and said, get out of here this very minute or I'll blow your fucking brains out. So I just said, okay, I'm going. Keep the ABBA book, keep the Mexican poster, keep all my picture sleeves from the German girl groups from the 60s that were autographed to me. It's just, don't shoot me. Even though I'd spent like 2-3 years of my life working on this book they put out, which was the first book that got them any positive attention, they decided, we're not going to pay this guy anymore.
They decided they didn't want to pay Boyd his royalties because they were afraid he was going to use it to promote Nazis or some such drivel. So I told them that I didn't really think that was fair, that agreement's agreement, and so they stopped paying me too. They stopped paying both of us at that point, which I guess is better than just paying one of us, but it still kind of sucked. Beth Love moved to Albuquerque, and then Boyd moved to Denver, and everything in San Francisco fell apart. It's been pretty dull ever since, actually. There hasn't been much going on here, in my opinion. So this was probably a good thing in a way, because it kind of kept Boyd from having to deal with it on a daily basis. It wasn't such a good thing in another way, in that it allowed these morons to continue with their palaver about what a terrible person Boyd was, and without anybody but maybe me to actually challenge these assertions.
There was this like increasing anti-Boyd hysteria, which really didn't affect me any, but it's like at a certain point during my last few months in San Francisco, somebody had gone all over the city and spray painted huge all over all these buildings, Boyd Rice Go Home. And then I could look out my own window and see sprayed across an entire side of this bar, Boyd Rice Go Home to Europe. One night, when I was an alarm agent, I would stop in at my apartment in the middle of the night to check my messages on my answering machine. And I'm dressed in this essentially this cop uniform. I'm wearing a .357 Magnum. I've got a badge. I've got a tie. So people think I'm a cop. And I'm coming out of my building, and there are these two. I see these guys standing there. I don't know what's happening. There are these two black guys with knives stabbing one another, and they're bleeding. And they're standing in a pool of blood. And I need to walk between these guys stabbing one another to get to my patrol vehicle. And I just pretend like nothing's happening. And people across the street are going, officer, stop those men. They're killing one another. And I just got in the car and drove off. So I'm coming home the next morning, the sun is rising, and the manager of my building is out trying to squirt all this dried blood off the marble at the entrance to our building. And the manager said, "Hey Boyd, when you were driving around last night, you didn't see anything unusual here, did you?" And I said, "No, I didn't see anything unusual." Because that's what San Francisco is like. I would see people attacked constantly. I'd be eating my favorite restaurant, and I look out, and there's some man a foot away from me, you know, on the other side of the window, vomiting on the sidewalk. And it's like the whole city of San Francisco begins to take on the aura of like a Joe Coleman painting or something, like the cover of Apocalypse Culture. After the guys stabbing one another, I just said, okay, it's not good here, because I've seen this happen to so many people that, you know, if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, it's going to eventually happen to you. Your number is going to come up. So I was going to New York to perform in this festival, this new music festival, and I stopped in Denver to do an installation here, and I just loved the city. It's like traveling 20 years into the past at the time. I loved the coffee shops, the waitresses in the coffee shops. I loved the thrift stores, and I loved just the look of it. The building I live in, it was built in 1890. My whole neighborhood, it's like you step out your door and it's like you're in the 1890s almost. There's still like rings in the pavement where you used to be able to tie up your horse when you were going into church. Stuff like that. So I just loved it here. I moved here. I liked it here. I looked for an apartment in the newspaper. I checked this place out. I wrote the guy a check, went back to San Francisco, got my stuff, moved here, never looked back. And as I was coming into town with all my belongings, the sun was rising, and there's a theater literally 2 blocks away from me, and Carnival of Souls was playing on the big screen. I thought, this is perfect. I'm home. So it's like I unpacked all my stuff, went to sleep, woke up, it was dark, and I went down to see Carnival of Souls on the big screen.
You heard the story of Jesse James, of how he lived and died. If you're still in need of something to read, here's a story of Bonnie and Clyde. Here 'tis, Clyde had a petite amie. She's beautiful, her name is
Bonnie.
Together they had left the straight and narrow, the gain of 2 and Clyde Barrow.
Bonnie and Clyde. Bonnie and Clyde. I knew Clyde back when he was an honest guy. Even then, he was not afraid to die.
For you must realize this, that it was society that drove me into the abyss.
Bonnie and Clyde. Bonnie and Clyde.
That is not what they write of she and I.
They say we kill in cold blood, they lie.
It's not true, but sure it's in our nature
To shoot first and ask questions later. Bonnie and Clyde. Bonnie and Clyde.
each time a policeman is maimed or killed.
Or a garage or a bank is robbed.
For the police, it is not mysterious. It's the sign of Clyde
and his mistress, Bonnie and Clyde. Bonnie and Clyde.
Every time we try to settle down
and have a home of our own in a quiet town,
within 3 days there's a tack, 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 tack
of the machine gun sneak attack. Bonnie and Clyde. Bonnie and Clyde.
One of these days we will die. I don't care if they skip me alive. It's for Bonnie that I fear.
Me, Bonnie, I tremble for Clyde Barrow. Bonnie and Clyde. Bonnie and Clyde.
We could not be left alive. The only solution was to die.
But more than one went with them when they died. Thus the legacy of Bonnie and Clyde. Bonnie and Clyde. Bonnie and
He is a scholar of evil. He's not evil. In fact, he's a very sweet, loving guy. But he seems to have an incredible knowledge of the nature of evil, and he seems willing to chronicle and look at it in a sort of empirical way. I'm not sure if it's empirical. Aesthetic way. And I think that he's pretty great.
Boyd Rice, recording artist, performer, and author, was appointed priest in the Church of Satan by the late Anton LaVey, a frequent visitor of Charles Manson, and friend and inspiration for the young Marilyn Manson. As a pioneer of noise music in the late 60s and 70s, Boyd has been known to uproot the status quo with radical and often uncomfortable propositions that has led to numerous debates with the religious right and earned a reputation as a social demiurge. Quoting from a press release from Boyd's record label, Mute Records, he is described as chameleon par excellence. His various paradoxical incarnations include multimedia prankster and legit actor, Gnostic philosopher, and camp culture aficionado. an uncompromising social Darwinist, Satanist spokesman, and self-proclaimed descendant of the bloodline of Jesus Christ. What are some of the positions that really got you in trouble? And I am going to lean towards the appropriation of Nazi aesthetic into your own, as an artist, as a performer. And how do you feel that functioning, or how do you feel that it is useful to appropriate these signifiers?
Well, I like the fascist aesthetic because it implies order. I'm into order and symmetry. I like militarism because in the military you have a goal you want to attain, you have tactics and strategies, and you attain the goal. Most people I know don't recognize any order in the world, and they don't apply any tactics and strategies to their life. And it's so easy to do. It's like, I know that anything I want to do, I can do it. I can just go after it in an orderly fashion.
I was talking before about how throughout the years I've seen certain images, certain photographs that have had a profound impact on me. Sometime in the mid-'80s, I got a book called Black Shirts in Britain about Oswald Mosley. And there was a picture of one of his rallies, and it looked like something out of a science fiction film. It didn't look like a political rally. It looked as though it was part of some bizarre secret ceremony, some initiatory ceremony. And it struck me that this is what rock concerts should be like, or concerts in general. They should be more like rituals or ceremonies or rallies. And during the last years of Throbbing Gristle, they called their concerts psychic rallies. And I'd been wanting for a long time to move more in that direction. And this photograph showed Mosley atop this massive, massive podium. And he had a gigantic lightning flash in a circle above him. And to either side there were smaller lightning flashes and circles. I decided when I started touring again, this is something that I wanted to do, something more along these lines. When I played in Osaka with Doug and Michael Moynihan and Rose McDowell and Tony Wakeford, this is the sort of thing I tried to do on a small scale. Years later, I would realize how many people had been influenced by this picture. If you look at the concert footage of the last concert of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars, Bowie copied that exactly. He had, in the middle of the stage, one gigantic lightning flash in a circle and smaller lightning flashes. And then I realized that Throbbing Gristle had taken the same symbol. They'd obviously been influenced by this. More than 10 years after the Osaka concert, I'd been in touch with Marilyn Manson for a long time. After I saw him the first time, he said, so Boyd, what'd you think of the concert? And I said, I loved it. I loved it. It's like a cross between glam rock and a Nuremberg rally. And I could almost see a light bulb going off over his head. And in every interview he did, he would tell people, Boyd Rice describes our concerts as being a cross between glam rock and a Nuremberg rally. When I went to see him in London, he'd taken that idea and run with it and tried consciously to make his concerts into a cross between glam rock and the Nuremberg rally. And he had the massive podium, which I had always wanted to do. And now he's done it, so it's like no need to do it anymore. But he had the massive podium, and he had huge banners with a circle and essentially a lightning bolt in it. This image had a profound impact on me, and the next time I gave concerts, I adopted the dress of Oswald Mosley. I was dressed in black jack boots, black riding breeches, black shirt and tie. I expected the people in England to be slightly offended by it, but in Britain, people who wear riding boots and riding breeches are just perceived as being aristocratic. But anyway, I think me and most of the people I'm interested in are aware of how to manipulate archetypes. David Bowie wanted to be a rock star, and he pretended to be a rock star, and everybody believed he was a rock star. Marilyn Manson essentially did the same thing. Andy Warhol wanted to be rich and famous. He started hanging out with people who was rich and famous, and he became even more rich and famous than he already was. And I think this is what all people of a certain vision
are aware of that, you know, manipulate archetypes, and you become an embodiment of that archetype. In my case, it probably hasn't been entirely positive.
Stop Nazi music.
Now, listen to this.
Stop
listen to
Nazi
this.
music.
Okay, when Boyd was at one of his concerts, he was chanting on stage, Genghis Khan, Adolf Hitler, Benito Mussolini, Nero, come back, come back, come back. Okay, what does that tell you?
Well, you think maybe he's just joking?
Nah, I don't think musicians ever joke about their work. They're pretty deadly serious, I think. Is that color film?
When he played in Nazi Germany for Adolf Hitler?
Who?
This man right here.
Death and Jew.
You know, anyone will make a buck off anything, you know. Even Adolf Hitler made $1 off of the world and slaughtered millions. You know. Make a buck off anything.
He's not a prankster. Does this look like a prankster to you? What's that in his hand? That's a knife. And the other half of the picture was his partner in crime, Hike, with even a bigger knife. And you know, that's not about pranksterism. That's about posturing and presenting and trying to attract people to fascism and engage people in fascist violence.
What did Boyd Rice say that was so fascistic?
Okay, he got on the stage and he said,
He loves Adolf Hitler. He thinks he should come back.
Genghis Khan, Adolf Hitler,
And all the other
Benito
great murderers
Mussolini,
in
Nero,
history.
come back, come back, come back. He didn't say anything about
Hey, how come
Napoleon.
when I was young and rock and rolling, I still am. Well, how come they didn't have Nazi bands back in the 60s?
They did. You saw Brian Jones wearing an SS uniform right here in town in Cantor's. We talked to Rodney Bingenheimer last night. He said, I was in Cantor's, Jewish deli, when, you know, Brian Jones came in. Wearing
I
what's
don't
that?
think Mick Jagger would appreciate you saying that.
No, Mick Jagger wore, you know, the T-shirt during punk rock with the swastika
I'm not a fan of Mick Jagger, so...
Keith Moon dressed up as, you know, Keith Moon, The Who. He dressed up in a Nazi uniform. The Stooges down the street of the Whiskey A Go-Go, they dressed up, and Irv Rubin
all
was...
that. Then you were copying Adolf Hitler and the Waffen-SS who slaughtered millions. Who my father risked his life to defeat them in war. Terrible war, the most terrible war in history, and you say that that's okay?
The most terrible war? Yeah, come on. All war isn't terrible?
Are you saying
that depends. It all depends.
In World War II was not a significant number? You know,
oh, now it's
you know.
100 million.
100 million.
First was 52 million, then they're saying 60 million. No.
40 million in China, 60 million in the rest of the world.
What's that?
40 million in China, and 60
Oh,
million.
40 million in China. Mao killed 23 million. He like starved them to death.
So you can say mixing apples and oranges is the same. Murder is just murder anywhere. So you can murder anybody too and just say that's all right.
Whoops.
You know?
No, if I murdered somebody, I'd do it for a purpose.
So you are, you would do it
Of course,
for
the
a purpose.
Nazis
And you
did it
are
for a
preaching
purpose.
murder.
Oh yeah, I'm preaching. I'm a recluse. I live in a basement in Denver, Colorado, and
Okay, well, that's
Nazi
very good.
through and through. All you have to say in support of this is that I've said Benito Mussolini, come back, come back. Genghis Khan, come
Go
back.
ahead,
Would you
make
take off
a
your
buck on
glasses a
hate,
second?
brother.
What?
You really like to make a buck on hate, don't you?
Are you Boyd Rice?
You know? Yeah.
See?
Are you Boyd Rice?
Who are you?
You don't even know who I am.
Now, you just need the peace that passes understanding. That's John 14. Peace I give to you. My peace I give unto you. Not as the world gives, gives I unto you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. Jesus Christ. That's real peace. Not the absence of conflict, but the presence of Christ. Two totally different things. And if you ever get that, you'll know the difference. I mean, you'll know how very, very real that is.
Bob's been working away at me over the past 14 years. He doesn't give up.
Well, some people take a little longer than others, and obviously Boyd does. I want to find out where his demons are. I want to find out if he's got some and where they are, and if I can get to them. But I can't get to them unless he lets me get to them. So that's kind of a catch-22 situation.
I don't remember when I first heard about the Partridge Family Temple, but you know, I always liked the Partridge Family when they were on TV when I was growing up, and it was kind of during the glam rock era. And I actually kind of like dressed a lot like David Cassidy when that show was on TV. It was that age when everybody had the feathery hairdos and stuff and wore tight sweaters and platforms and things. You know, people really do need a sense of spirituality in their life, and it doesn't matter if you choose your gods to be television characters, because all TV shows, they're all the same show. It's just like sometimes it's a good show and sometimes it's a bad show. You can go back through 60 shows to modern times and you can pick out the archetype. There's always like the father figure. There's always the, like in Ponderosa, you know, there's the father figure. There's the handsome brother, then there's a young cute brother, there's a wacky goofy brother. I understood this, and I like became a staunch supporter of these guys, and I started listening to the Partridge Family all over again. And the songs really are deep, and they really do have all these layers of meaning. And whether the songwriters were intentionally putting that in there, or whether it was just some unconscious manifestation of some eternal truth. But too, I like the fact that it's like, at the time, everybody was into being cynical and being ironic and being rebellious. And to me, a group of people who said, you know, our religion is based on fun. And that's what we try to do. 24 hours a day, we try to have fun. We try to make our lives into an interesting episode of a television show. You know, it's like your life is your own show. You're the star of the show. You're the director. You write the lines. So you can make it into the groovy show on TV, or you can make it into something that you know, is going to be canceled straight away because there's nothing interesting going on.
I've always been into full-blown, you know, homosexual freedom, absolutely, and Boyd's that way too. And so it's sort of interesting. That's what I was saying. Like when I met him, it really was sort of like a beatnik experience. You know, I feel like these kind of meeting of minds. Sort of like we go into the basement and drink alcohol and like discuss these taboo subjects and things that people would be upset about. But it's sort of laying the groundwork for things to come. You know what I mean? And it really was like a true area of freedom. Like, just there's no censorship, there's no lines drawn. The problem with most people, they're just not honest. And if you are honest, you know, they say honesty is the best policy, but it really causes a lot of problems. It causes a lot of problems for Boyd, it causes a lot of problems for me and many other homosexual scientists, because it really is true. Honesty just pisses people off. The truth pisses people off, you know. Like David Cassidy said, truth is a knife and it stabs deep. It really upsets people. My old friend Adam Sleek, who's an insane person who actually just passed away to Albuquerque, he would play. First time it happened, I was a born-again Christian, and I was looking through his record collection, and I looked over, he had a Partridge Family album, and I hated the Partridge Family when I was a kid. When it would come on, I'd get a creepy feeling. I'd always turn the channel, and I really have an aversion to redheads with freckles, and Danny really disturbed me. And so I saw the Partridge Family, I was like, what kind of person? This is what I was like, what kind of person could conceive to listen to something this creepy? And Adam Sleek, he always the classic thing, he'd be like, have you heard them lately? And he'd say this to everyone. And so that was when I was 17, so when I was 19, I was back in Denver. We were hanging out with Adam Sleek, and we went to a coffee house called Cafe 13. And on the jukebox was the Partridge Family. He freaked out. He couldn't believe that they had the Partridge Family. So he'd go there. He'd constantly put the Partridge Family on over and over. People started to get so angry. People would unplug it. People would smash the jukebox. They'd get so he'd flip that over. I Think I Love You and 24 hours a day. And as he played it, all of a sudden something happened. All of a sudden I got it. That music seemed so powerful, 24 hours a day. And so that was the beginning. And then I'd go to his house. I go, do you have the parchment? Yeah, he had shopping bag and notebook. And we listened to that constantly. So then I told Dan, I was like, hey, Dan Kapelowitz, I was like, you gotta listen to this. This music is mind-blowing. And we listened to it, and he's like, oh my God. And that summer was when the temple was born.
My name's Keith Partridge. I'm the second incarnation of Keith Partridge. David Cassidy was the first.
We really alienated a lot of people. People got actually angry at us. Our friends, because we're at that age, we were into things like the Butthole Surfers and, people were into Sonic Youth or, like hipster stuff, And to listen to Parchment was not considered funny, wasn't considered ironic, because we really loved it. People got angry. People were viciously angry. We'd drive, and of course, that's all we listened to in the car. We'd drive around, people had to listen to the Parchment. People would get so mad, they wanted to listen to like Neubauten and stuff like that. And it was great. And so we listened to it constantly. That's how the Parchment Temple started. And it's a very personal thing. That went on for about a year. And then Dan had gone away to college, and I had this really insane dream that I was at my old friend's house. I was in the backyard, and Marcia Brady was there, and she was holding me in her arms. And the moon was glowing white behind her and bathing us. And I looked at her, I go, I want to fuck her, it's Marcia Brady. And then I said, well, no, I can't. I go, maybe she represents my mom. I go, no. And I tried to kiss her, and I go, maybe it's my sister. I go, no. And I just realized she was just pure. And I woke up, and even though it wasn't the Partridge family, it connected. I remember walking down the street going, something really weird's going on that my dreams are speaking to me about. It's like, this Parchment Temple thing is about to become something much more real. And sure enough, it did. It just grew and grew and grew. We realized there were gods one day, and we realized that Danny was the trickster, and Loki, and Keith was the war god, and Shirley's Isis, and Lori's the whore of Babylon.
Chris and Tracy, which sometimes referred to as like little like the nymph and nymphette, yin and yang, and like these cute little characters. And then Simone the dog is the wild beast. It's all about fun. It's all about listening to the music and watching television, because television's God. And it's like, people, their whole lives are ran by television. So there's nobody that can actually argue that TV is not God.
The Pope came to Denver, and Boyd put his priest outfit on and went down there. He's walking around, and he said he's sitting there. He looks really normal. He's in this priest outfit, and all of a sudden these kids sheepishly came up to him and were like, "Father," and he's really confused. He forgot he's wearing the priest outfit. It's like, yeah. He's like, yeah, and they're like, "Will you bless our rosary beads?" And they gave him rosary beads, and so he took them, just stared at them, and then he put them in his mouth and went, "Argh!" and shook his head back and forth with saliva going everywhere like some insane person. And then he pulled them out of his mouth. They're all dripping wet. He's like, "Here you go." And the kids took them. They're just like trembling and confused. Like, in their mind, a priest just did that,
Back in 1990, when I was in the Manson group with the Spooky Kids, I worked at a record store in the back room where I would do shipping and receiving, and Manson worked in the front of the store as a clerk. And working in the back gave me plenty of opportunity to stash CDs down my pants and go sell them for like drug money. When I worked in the back, I used to listen to the radio, like talk radio. Was very into, still am today. And there was a show on there, the host was Bob Larson, Christian guy. Kids would call up and say, I worship the devil, Slayer is the best, and I'm going to kill you, and this and that. And it was the greatest.
I'm taking on the forces of darkness. I'm dealing directly with the devil. I am here. I've got a Satanist live in person, a member of the priesthood of the Church of Satan, a man who is dedicated to destruction, war, bloodshed, and primordial barbarianism right here live in the studio.
In a nutshell, your belief, Boyd, as a Satanist committed to war and bloodshed, is what? Is that the strong dominate the weak and the clever dominate the strong. That's it, absolutely, in a nutshell. That's what social Darwinism is all about. But we have a situation today where the weak are dominating the strong, and we've had that situation for the past 2,000 years because I think you know why. Because of Christ. Because of Christ.
I brought Manson in the room and Boyd Rice was on, and I was like, man, you got to check this guy out. I don't know if it's like a goof or if he's like really evil, because he seems like ultra uber evil to be serious, but we couldn't stop listening to him, you know, and it was fascinating. This guy was talking about all these esoteric references and this and that, stuff I've never heard of.
Who's your God? My God is Abraxas. Represents the balance point between good and evil. It's the only power that can bridge the gap in man's divided nature. You've got a God who's all mixed up. He doesn't know whether he's good or bad. It's both at the same time. You can't be good and bad at the same time. You can't say I love you and rape somebody at the same time. A lot of people do it.
So ever since that time, me and Manson, we would research Boyd Rice and see what he was into.
This is interesting, sir. You've handed me here, and I have it in my hands right now, Charlie Manson's annotated Bible. Mm-hmm. This was Charlie's Bible in prison. Scriptures are underlined, and Charlie's written little margin notes. Mm-hmm. This man is crazy. He is underlining Bible scriptures. What does he mean? To the only one there is, Charlie. What does he mean by writing that under receiving Christ as my Savior? What does he mean?
You live in a completely different reality than what he lives in.
I live in reality, sir.
No, he lives in reality. You live in the world of humanity.
Charlie Manson lives in reality and I don't?
Absolutely.
The man directed the murder of 7 people, and the suspicion is many others that they haven't been able to solve. The man is a convicted mass murderer, and you're telling me that Charlie Manson has more reality than I do?
Reality is reality. And the reality of this is that my daughter was 8.5 months pregnant, strung up by the neck after being stabbed 16 times. Is that formulated enough for you?
The reality of it is, Doris, that this has given you an identity for the past 20 years or so. This is probably the best thing that ever happened to you, because you get to go
No, wait a minute.
Hey.
How dare you say this is the best thing that ever happened to her?
Exactly.
Her
She
daughter
would
was
have more identity without that.
Who needs identity, sir? I don't
Apparently
need
you
it.
do.
She doesn't need identity through her daughter being murdered.
What did this God of yours ever do for Sharon Tate? Did he offer any divine protection when those
Well,
people came out there?
she happens to be with him now.
Well, then everything's fine. What are you whining about?
Her daughter was murdered. The baby was murdered. 6 other people were killed. And you tell me this is the best thing that ever happened to this woman. Would you want me to sit here if somebody sliced your throat open and grin at you and say, that's the best thing that ever happened to you?
That's not the same thing. You're inverting what I said and turning it into
Murder is murder, sir. Murder is murder, Boyd. Her daughter
murder exists throughout the order of nature. You murder every time you go into a McDonald's to eat a hamburger.
Give me a break. How dare you? How dare you compare that to this woman's daughter?
I heard Boyd Rice on there a few times, and I thought he was the devil, the things he was saying.
Haven't you ever wondered if you need an exorcism?
No, I've never felt that.
It never even crossed your mind? Maybe I need an exorcism.
You're saying maybe you need it?
No, maybe you need an exorcism. Never thought of it?
Never thought of it.
I mean, not even in sort of psychological terms, let alone the hardcore spiritual terms that I think of.
No, because I've always, from the time I was a kid, I had certain things I wanted to do, and I always pursued them, I always attained them, and that's made me very happy.
But on the dark side, on the negative side?
No, it's like a balance between dark and light. There's always going to be some darkness in there, don't you think?
No.
No? Don't you would probably claim you've seen a lot of darkness.
Well, yes, but what I'm saying is that in truth there is no darkness. In your paradigm of reality, yes, because it's not truth. It's, I don't know, you can give it labels if you want to, but it's the yin, the yang, the Tao, the whatever. It's the opposites. But Jesus,
opposites complement one another, so they're really dual aspects of one another.
Which, of course, is the opposite of Christian theology, because the Bible says you overcome evil with good. You displace it, you eradicate it, and you don't coexist with it, and you don't manipulate it, and it's not a matter of, your controlling the forces. The Bible says there's two forces and one of the two control you. So it's a very, very different paradigm of reality, which we already know.
Yeah.
Very, very different paradigm of reality.
It's the basis of our relationship.
Well, it is a dichotomy, and there are many people who have wondered, and if I tell them we met again, will say, why do you talk to those people? Are you even around those people? I say, if I'm not around them, who is going to be around them? They're going to be all around their kind of people. I mean, this is what Jesus came for. The sinners. But people ask that question. I guess they have an illusion of what people like you must be like. You know, you must walk through the door with blood dripping from your mouth and come here to perform all kinds of evil.
Yeah, well, people always assume that I really hate you. I never have. People are like, oh, Bob Larson, I hate that guy. Don't you hate him? I said, no, you know, what's to hate? You know, he's doing exactly what he thinks he should be doing, and, you know, can't argue with that.
I guess the thing is, though, if I'm right, you lose it all. If you're right, I basically lose nothing. I mean, what have I missed if you're right? Because I've lived a different reality than you allow that. I mean, I think that's your philosophical approach, that, you know, this is my reality and this is the world I choose to live in, and so what? If I'm content with that. But my viewpoint is if I'm right, you've lost it all now, and more importantly, for all of eternity. So you're taking a bigger risk than I am. Much bigger risk.
Blessed are the strong, for they shall possess the earth.
So it's interesting that you said previously you wanted Non's music to kind of wipe all the thoughts out of people's heads so that they would just rely on their instincts. And now the music on Might, it served to kind of give emphasis to the words of Mr. Redbeard, as spoken by you.
You know, I think the emphasis is on ideas, and I've always been excited by ideas and how they can transform your experience of things. And even when I was out to burn all the thoughts out of people's heads, I was interested in ideas. And I think the difference is that my older music was more like an oral Rorschach test or something, and it was meant to stimulate thought at the same time it destroyed thought. And like a Rorschach test, I think I was giving the listener patterns that they could project ideas on, and now I think I'm giving people just more fully formulated ideas.
I went to a cocktail party, and it's the first time I ever heard of Boyd Rice. There was some of the Gothic crowd was there, and they referred to him as the modern equivalent of Aleister Crowley. I was intrigued. Then when I came to Denver, I didn't know he was living here. When I came here, somebody told me that he was spinning records at the Lions Lair Lounge, so I stopped in there and see for myself. And I think it's back in '96. I'd been to like a lot of different, of course, bars and stuff all over the world, but I never heard that kind of a mixture of music before. It's pretty mind-expanding. It turned me on to a lot of music. I remember girls would take their clothes off all the time. And I remember one time I was sitting in a booth. I was sitting with you and some of your friends, and a girl goes in the bathroom. She comes back and she's completely naked. And nobody's like really freaking out about it. Just sort of a pagan thing to do. Everybody's like, "Hey, it's a naked girl." It was a pretty bohemian atmosphere back then.
Those things happened a number of times at the Lions Lair, where I really felt like, you know, I was the Denver equivalent of Z-Man, you know. This is my happening, it freaks me out. So I got all sorts of people to take their clothes off at the Lions Lair, you know. I'd have like a booth full of naked women sitting with me, and the bartenders never minded because it's like all the clientele loved it, you know. It's like people would be running back and forth to the drugstore next door getting disposable cameras or buying Polaroid cameras and taking all these photos. So it was a good time. There's some happy memories from that period. Tiny Tim, you know, was just total fun, but he had a dark side as well. He would call me up late at night and discuss women and quote me chapter and verse from the Bible, from the Old Testament, about woman is put on earth to be a servant of man. And he would say, Mr. Boyd, woman is like a horse, and if you are riding a horse, you don't want to let the horse go where it wants to go. You have to direct the horse. You have to make the horse go where you want it to go. And Manson said very much the same thing, except he said that women were dogs. If you have a dog that's had a couple owners before you, that dog will never be your dog. You've got to bring that dog up from the time it's a pup. You've got to get women when they're very young and train them to understand your will, so that you own that dog. That woman is yours. LaVey would say you need a woman who's as young as your daughter, so you can be her father, her mentor, and her lover. And it's like all this stuff made sense to me. You know, maybe this is my chance to have the woman who's still pure and hasn't been screwed over by a bunch of weak-willed, spineless men. So I go through this surreal period of like, Tiny Tim and me are vying for the affections of this same young girl. And I'd tell my friends in San Francisco about this, and none of them would believe me. Because, you know, stuff like this never happens to them. Stuff like this always happens to me. So, but nobody believed me. They just kind of go, oh yeah, that's interesting, if that's what you think. But at any rate, so Tiny Tim would be calling me up about this late at night, and it's like, oh, Mr. Boyd, I'm so in love, but I'm an honorable man, and I don't want to step into your territory. And it's like, it was a very surreal period of my life, because it's like I grew up on Tiny Tim, loved Tiny Tim, and it's like, imagine it's like this weird 70-year-old guy is vying for the affections of this young girl, and so am I.
So I have this impression of Boyd Rice, really nice guy, really down to earth, really cool. And then we decided we were going to trade paintings. So he was very fond of one of my paintings from my She-Mail series, so he wanted that. And then I sent that to him, and then he sends me this painting, which I get it, and he tells me how he did it. It's a skull on paper, but over it is blood, and he told me it was the blood of a menstruating 13-year-old virgin. And he said, well, she was a virgin when I met her, but then you know how that goes. So my whole image of Boyd Rice, of being this nice guy, down to earth, you know, pretty normal, once I got that painting, that all flew out the window. So now I think he's even worse than what I thought of him back on the Bob Larson show. He's like the devil times 3.
Adam Parfrey actually did this, and I reworked it. It's called How God Makes Little Girls. To make a girl, God takes ribbons and lace, adds sweetness and dimples and a smile for the face, a carefree laugh, a winsome wink, some giggles, some curls, and a touch of pink. Then he stirs in more love. Then there is tea in China. And to round it all out, includes a vagina. I'll second that.
He used to talk to me about the afterlife, and he said, the afterlife, Mr. Boyd, is a lovely thing. It's a place where you can have sex with very young girls, and it's not a sin. You can eat pizza all day long, and you'll never put on weight. You can drink beer and have McDonald's hamburgers. And this was his idea of the Garden of Earthly Delights. McDonald's hamburgers, sex with young girls, and beer. So wherever you are, Tim, you know, I hope, you know, God to Christ, I hope you've gotten to that happy place where you want it to be.
There are a lot of stories Anton LaVey told me that I was forbidden to tell during his life, just because he didn't want the idea to get out there like a virus. He had a whole filing cabinet full of nutcase letters, and he'd get them out and read them, and he'd show me the photographs these people sent. He was telling me a story about this one woman who, even at the time, wrote to him on a weekly basis. Diane came in and said, there's a very strange woman hanging around outside, and she's wearing these white flowing robes, and she just like has been standing there all day. And then Xena comes in from school. She's a little girl, and she said, "Dad, there's a weird woman wearing a white gown standing outside." And he's, yeah, she's been there all day. So finally it's time. He gets out to go to his car and go someplace. This woman walks up and says, "Are you Anton LaVey?" And he says, "Yes, how may I help you?" And he starts feeling this weird sensation in his stomach, and he looks down, and this woman is stabbing him repeatedly in the stomach. And luckily, it was a very dull blade. It didn't pierce the skin, but he got these bruises all over his stomach. And he just kind of threw her to the ground, overpowered her, sat on her, and yelled, "Hey, Diane, call the police, call the cops." And so he sat on the woman till the police came, and you know, they sent her to an institution for the criminally insane, where presumably she still is to this very day. But for whatever reason, she wrote letters to Anton every single week. And it was right after that that he put the fence up in front of the house. So you couldn't just walk up and knock on the door. Without having known him, nobody can ever know what kind of a person this was. He was 1,000 times funnier than anyone can imagine. He was 1,000 times harsher than anyone can imagine. He had like a fucking arsenal. I would come over on a weekly basis, and he would like, "Hey Boyd, look at my new sniper rifle." And he'd get this thing out, and it came in a little case, and you'd put it together. It had this sight where he said, "You could knock a lug nut off a wheel of a car 3 blocks away." After that incident with the woman, he had the whole house rigged up with the shotgun situation, where if you like open the window or you come through a door that you're not supposed to, the shotgun would just blast the fuck out of you. And he's telling me about this, and I said, "Well, you know, Anton, just recently in Florida, somebody rigged their liquor store up like that, and like, guy got killed, and they sued him, and it's like, the criminal's family got all this money, and the guy lost his business. It's like, isn't that a concern?" He said, "They could sue you if they found the body." So the guy was pretty hardcore, and there were times when I thought he was going to go out in a blaze of glory. There were times during his divorce hearings when, he was just saying, "The cops want this stuff, they can come and fucking take it from me." It's like I could imagine him up there with his sniper rifle and the entire San Francisco SWAT team there, and I could imagine myself with him. Because it's like, at that point, I would have, if he'd said, "Boyd, are you going to let these fuckers take everything in the Black House, or you're going to go down the blaze of glory with me?" It's like, I would have been there in the blaze of glory, in a heartbeat. But, fabulous guy. It's, it's a shame people will never, it's impossible for people through the media to really ever know the true Anton LaVey. One of a kind.
Somewhere in the late 1990s, Boyd spent a couple weeks at my house in Cleveland. We were recording some music. Some of those songs ended up being the latter half of the God and Beast album. This was during the time period of the Got Milk campaign. And Boyd saw this billboard. His eyes lit up. He said, "Oh, you gotta pull over the truck. I gotta look at this thing." So we pull over the truck. We get out, we climb up this ladder, look at this giant billboard, and he says, "Yeah, we gotta go get some black spray paint. I got a great idea." So we do, and we come back. We climb back up the ladder onto the billboard, and the advertisement reads, "What's the magic word?" And it's a giant picture of David Copperfield, the magician, with the white mustache, and underneath "What's the magic word?" it says calcium. So Boyd had the foresight to know that if he removed just a couple, strategically removed a couple of these letters of the word calcium, that we might have a more effective advertisement. So We spray painted off a couple letters, and we climbed back down to admire our work. And now the advertisement read, "What's the magic word?" There's David Copperfield with a big white mustache on his upper lip. And now, instead of calcium, it reads, "Come."
Love will change the world. That's what we were told in the 60s. Love will make you happy. Love one another. Love makes the world go round. All you need is love. We've talked of love nonstop for the last few decades. Actually, for the last few thousand years. Where exactly has it gotten us? Are we one step closer to paradise? Hardly. Love hasn't stopped war, cured crime, or eased poverty. Hasn't even come close. Look for any sign of improvement, and I guarantee you'll see only the most cosmetic of changes. Window dressing, empty symbolism, fatuous falderall. Things are getting better all the time, the Lovnicks assure us. What about peace in the Mideast? What about harmony in South Africa? Sure, there's peace in the Mideast, in between bombings. And there's plenty of harmony in South Africa, if you're wealthy enough to live behind electrified fences and locked gates. In reality, things have turned to shit. Social and moral decay is like an out-of-control cancer that's taken charge, a cancer born of love. If some people are actually stupid enough to believe that things are improving, it's only because their poor brains are so benumbed by love that they can no longer think straight. Love. Sickly love. Brotherly love. Unconditional love. Cowardly love. Geek love. A love that says relinquish judgment. A love that encourages acceptance at the expense of discernment. It's no wonder people imagine things have changed for the better, when in fact all that's changed is their capacity to accept any amount of shit unconditionally. So the verdict on love is both bad and good. The bad news is that love has turned the world into a sewer. The good news is that people have learned to love the smell of shit. Sometimes a man and woman spend 10 or 20 years together, and they don't belong together. And then one day, one of them tries to leave, and does, but in a most peculiar way. Woman, one of these days I'm leaving you far behind. And on that day you'll be grieving. Grieve on, woman, I don't mind. Look out in the backyard, Mama, 'cause I'm leaving you real soon. Gonna fly me up to heaven in my big red balloon. This is a poem about love and how hideous can be. It's called The Only Thing Worse. Once upon a time, I fell in love with a girl part angel, part demon. We laughed all day, and we fucked all night. And I filled her up with my semen. When we fell apart, it saddened my heart, but happily I found the only thing worse than living without her was having her around. When Lisa Carver left Denver, ending the 2 most miserable years of my life, I sort of said to myself, I'm never going to get in a relationship ever again. But, you know, you always have that one thing. But I said, unless I meet a girl that looks like Unity Mitford, like a big, tall Valkyrie of a girl who wears black long-sleeve shirt and a necktie and dresses in a uniform. So it's like, I was at the Expo of the Extreme in Chicago, and this girl comes through the door dressed exactly that way, and I was talking to Eldon, and I said, excuse me, I've got to go say something to this girl. And I walk up and I said, you're the most amazing looking woman I've ever seen in my life. And I introduced myself, and she says, yeah, I know who you are. My name's Margaret.
I have oodles of love letters from Boyd Rice. And I've never been able to read them all because they make me too lonesome, because Boyd is the best boyfriend any girl could ever have. And just reading these letters makes me so full of want for Boyd. But I assure you that these letters are absolutely the best love letters anybody has ever received. Most people seem to me like the guy we met at the bus station. He's probably smart enough, has some good interests, maybe even some of the right ideas. But at the end of the day, he has absolutely nothing to offer me or show me. Walking through a world populated by people such as this gives one the feeling of being perhaps the last living cell in a dead body. I know you feel that everyone has a story to tell, but for me, 99 times out of 100, it's a story I don't care to know. Crowley, smart as he was, felt that every man and woman is a star. That's total bullshit. Stars are few and far between. That's why they're cherished. They're beacons of brightness in a vast world of darkness, separated one from another by countless light years of distance. Few people are as stars that truly shine and sparkle and give off brilliance. Planets, sure. Asteroids, absolutely. Far more people are like moons, able to reflect light but incapable of generating it. I cherish you because I'm acutely, painfully aware of just how rare you are. And even though many, many miles separate us, I can always feel the warmth of your glow and savor your brilliance. I'm so very glad that you've come into my life. All my love, Boyd.
Margaret was just around that whole weekend for the Expo of the Extreme, and we were like running around with Roz Williams. I was sitting next to him in the bar at the motel, and we were just talking for about an hour. And at a certain point I said, oh, by the way, my name is Boyd. And he said, yeah, I know. My name's Roz. I said, Roz Williams? He says, yeah. And I said, why didn't you tell me, why didn't you mention something earlier? And he said, I thought you might beat the shit out of me. And I said, why would I do that? And he said, because I'm queer. It's like, yeah, so is everybody else I know.
At a certain point, he said, you know, Boyd, I used to stalk you in San Francisco. I knew the restaurant you ate at every single day, and you always ate at the same place at the same time. And at the time, he was married to Ava O, and he would tell her, I'm going down to the video store. And he said, I would stand across the street and watch you eat your salad every day before your fettuccine al pesto came. And so he was if he was a stalker, he was very charming. And he said he would always stay out at least an hour or so, and then he'd come back with these videos, and Ava O would say, you weren't getting videos, you were watching Boyd Rice eat a salad, weren't you?
He was a really fun guy. We were supposed to record together and do all this stuff, but you know, he ended up hanging himself. And he did it on April Fool's Day, so I for a long time didn't know whether it was true or not.
What the fuck is this on the back of your...
It's Jeffrey.
It's what?
Jeffrey Dahmer as a boy. He's beautiful. Have you ever read any books about him?
I have not, really.
Where this picture came from was from the book his father wrote. His father's a pig. And one reason that he wrote the book was to make money off of him. But there was this beautiful Polaroid shot of him on Halloween dressed as a devil with his best friend who was also dressed as a devil. So I asked someone to paint this photographic. Everybody wait. Bye, Roz. Bye, Roz. Come down.
Bye, Roz.
I was during another tour of the late 1990s, probably the one before the 99 one, where we'd just finished. We'd just done our last performance in Germany, and we were staying at this very picturesque hotel in a snowbound village somewhere in the countryside. And we checked in very late, all of us, and there was a discussion about the keys, and there was some sort of misunderstanding from Boyd and Albin that the key to Albin's room will be left on the outside of the door. So we all went to bed, and sure enough there was a door with the key on the outside, but evidently this wasn't the door that Albin should have walked into. It was belonging to two old German men that were sleeping in bed together. They'd forgotten the key on the outside, and Albin went in, realised his mistake and left. But then he told Boyd and said, you know, you've tricked me, you made me go into the wrong room. And Boyd said, no, I haven't done it yet, here's the real key. But as those guys have left the key on the outside of the door, why don't we do something with this situation? So as it happened, we were carrying with us some gorilla masks, and we also had some swastika armbands. At the time we'd done a phony photo shoot for a group that doesn't actually exist called Chimpanzees Are Hairy, and C18 to those in the know, and they decided to utilise the moment by donning these gorilla masks and putting the swastika armbands on and grabbing some fruit from the bowls in reception, and they crept into the room again, put the lights on, and the guys sleeping immediately woke up. What? And Albin and Boyd kind of jumped around the bed throwing fruit at these guys and then ran out the room. And there was a lot of shouting and hollering, and I remember Albin rushing into my room to hide, the pathetic weakling that he is, and here the sort of the calamity suddenly kind of like eventually come to a hush. But for me, I think the best thing was in the morning, as it was me that went down when the two guys were at reception. They're obviously explaining the situation to the people behind the reception desk, who could hardly keep a straight face, that these two drunk old Germans were telling them that during the middle of the night they'd had the misfortune to have their room invaded by two gorillas dressed up as Nazis throwing fruit at them. Was, I think, just a little bit too hard to believe for these very nice people in the countryside in reception. That was another nice little incident that tours are made of with Boyd.
I've got my hands in a lot of different things. So it's like, for instance, did you know that just before I came here, I designed a tiki bar in Denver?
Yes, I've heard of it.
So that's like a brand new thing, where I go into like a real place in the real world and completely make it into a total environment, and it'll probably be there for years. And everybody that goes in is like they're walking into the dream of Boyd Rice. They're living in my imagination, and they're actually having cocktails.
Aloha, welcome to Tiki Boyd's. This was the most dismal, depressing place. I thought, well, it's great to have my friend work in a bar a half block from my house, but this place is miserable. The manager was saying to everybody, you know, how can we get even more people in here? And Frank from Modern Drunkard and virtually everybody else said, turn it into a tiki bar and let Boyd do it. Put Boyd in charge of it. So a couple days after that, the guy gave me the green flag, and I started turning this place into a tiki bar. When we started, the entry hall had 2 sports pennants glued to the wall and a Massachusetts license plate affixed to the wall with a thumbtack. I was here every day while everybody else was asleep, painting it and putting up bamboo and tikis and colored lanterns and things. And in like a couple weeks we had this place totally transformed into a tiki bar. I wanted to create a place that would be a total environment that would be like a world-class tiki bar in 1962 or 63 or something, where you just walk into it and be the pure exotica experience. I think, you know, if I ever have my own tiki bar, I'm going to have tikis everywhere. It's like you'll be able to sit down in any position and just look and see a half dozen tikis. So I've done that with this place. There is one place where you can sit, and without moving your head at all, you can see 13 different tikis. And that's what a tiki bar should be like. Super dark, the colored lights, bamboo, fake little tiki huts, and tikis everywhere. We are obsessive about playing the right music. Only Martin Denny and you know, people like that. Throw in a little bit of Annette Funicello, Hawaiianette, Elvis doing the Blue Hawaii soundtrack. Their business has increased 20-fold. Like last night, this place was just packed with people. I think about the third week the Tiki Bar was open, this guy appeared, and he had all these clippings from old newspapers and ads and things. And it turns out that the Ramada used to be called Heart of Denver Motor Lodge. And when it opened in 1960, the very space where we have Tiki Boyd's is a Tiki Bar. And it was not only a tiki bar, but it was designed by this guy, Eli Headley, who's the original beachcomber. And he built a house someplace here in California. He built it entirely out of driftwood and stuff. And then he started designing bars like Trader Vic's and On the Beachcombers. And he designed Adventureland at Disneyland for Walt Disney. And he designed this bar. So now we've enlarged all these things. We have them all over a wall at Tiki Boyd's. Eli Headley died in 1981, but his grandson, Bamboo Ben, is in Huntington Beach, and he's still designing tiki bars. He's carrying the flame for the Headley family. Everybody who's involved in this, like the manager of the place, wasn't particularly interested in tikis or anything, but when people hear about this, they become almost spiritual or religious. The manager is saying, like, Boyd, this bar was meant to be. It's like the gods of tiki have called us to this exact spot. So it's kind of become, like in the tiki community, this mythic thing. It's like, oh my God, these people created a bar without knowing it. They were building a tiki bar exactly where a tiki bar existed for like 10 years, starting in 1960. Oh, but what if I believe that man has an immortal soul and that I'll live on in some form?
Oh, you're evolving.
There's not necessarily a person who's keeping tabs on me.
So you've moved from the dust and worms now to that possibility?
Yeah.
Well, so you're now moved from Satanism to spiritualism.
Well, mysticism perhaps.
Mysticism.
Gnosticism.
And you haven't called John Edwards yet to see if he can talk to somebody who's over there? Well, that's at least a step forward from where you used to be, at least from my perspective, as you're entertaining at least the survivability of the soul,
yeah,
and the possibility of individuated identity after death.
I don't know if it'll be individuated identity. I don't know. That's one of those things, you know.
Survive for what? I mean, what would you survive for?
I don't know. Going into another form, maybe a form of pure consciousness, maybe reincarnation. I mean, I do, at this point, believe in reincarnation.
Oh, no, okay, well.
Many lives, and we come back, and because I've always known things that I've never been taught.
Now you have to turn in your Church of Satan card.
I tried, and they wouldn't take it.
Now these are dangerous beliefs. I mean, you know. What has happened to your old misanthropic idea of things? I mean, obviously you must have mellowed in your hatred for humanity.
Well, I'm still fairly misanthropic. I just don't think I'm actively misanthropic because I'm a very happy individual, and I find that if I treat everybody with a certain degree of civility, they usually treat me with civility. So generally they're used to people treating them rottenly, and when somebody comes along who's nice to them, it's a big change for them, and I get to see the best side of everybody because I treat everybody decently, and they in turn are nice to me.
Do you realize what you just said? You have just recited in part the Sermon on the Mount. You have just articulated one of the most important ethics that Jesus taught. Do unto others as you would have them to do unto you.
So I told you I know things that I've never been taught.
You are getting closer to the kingdom of God. At least you've taken a step toward a biblical ethic. That's wonderful. Now, you may not have approached it as a biblical ethic. I mean, you just approached it as a practical reality.
Yeah, pragmatic, but I mean, there are a lot of biblical ethics I buy into. I mean, I'm totally into Mosaic law, probably more so than you are.
Mosaic law?
Yeah.
Oh, my. Okay.
I mean, it's the entire Western system of justice is based on it, isn't it?
That's a wonderful pragmatic conclusion for an ex-Satanist to make. I can't believe that. That's right. Our whole law system, English common law, everything that we do functions in this country from a Judeo-Christian ethic. Boy, God's really working on you, isn't he? God's really doing a job. Oh boy, this is, I mean, I'm sure God realizes, I'm sure God realizes what a big job he's got here. That's great. That's wonderful. That's very, very good news.
Well, you'd said one time, every time you saw me, I was a little bit kinder and gentler than the time before.
Well, yeah, I mean, at least you're not...
I really believe that was true. But
at least you're not, at least at this point, trying to bring back Thor to declare total war.
Yeah, I need to change the lyrics to bringing back Thor.
Well, I deal with a few of those Odinistic demons from time to time.
I think, you know, it sounded like we jogged them a little bit, like had one start and then another one start shortly there, so they like build up, and then they probably end at different times, so they probably would start out low and then build up to this drone and then end up getting a bit higher in the middle. The concept how to keep it in that about 4 minutes or something?
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Or, you know, maybe even less than 4 minutes. Okay. Yep, exactly like that. That's what I was imagining.
Okay, there's two things that are in this one thing I'd like to remove, though.
Huh.
Do you hear it?
Yeah.
Okay.
spent their time protesting when they should be on the internet or watching television or, watching dinner about sex. Some people don't deserve to have a life. Anything that keeps these people from fucking is the best goddamn thing for the future of humanity. Because it means less people. Less people who are in front of you when they scripting behind me. Less people who say they're going to send you something express now, and you know they're not into their team. If hot air were gold, such people would be rich. But it's not, and they aren't. There are people who love to complain. They talk. It's a lot of bitching and whining. And they complain if you have a few words in a song and say, Hitler, Mussolini, Saddam Hussein, Osama bin Laden, come back, we need you now! David Cassidy, come back! The New York Dolls, come back! The world needs to be fun! There's just so many disappointments. We're here to fight that. You're here to fight that. You're no abundance. You're abundance. You're the body children. Gabriel D'Annunzio. And we have poison heart and monkey, robbery. Everything is groovy. That's what life should be. It should be one big, long, groovy, psychedelic dream. With laughter, with fun, television, wall-to-wall television. Yeah, what is this crazy town? Wall-to-wall television. It's amazing. All our movie friends are here tonight. Larry Wessel's here tonight. John L. Dawes here tonight. Bruce Danner here tonight. Andy DeFrisco. You wanted to support your family temples here. All of the beautiful people are here. Thank you for coming out tonight. Bless you. Guten Tag. Thank you for coming out to the cabaret.
That was a happening, Daddy. Thank you very much. Good night. A lovely peace loving
Yeah, it's thematic, but we're gonna go downstairs and maybe I'll see you later. I'll be back later.
That was just a
Oh, what's that?
could have been good too, so that.
Yeah, that could have been very strange.
That was fantastic. That was just fantastic.
I like
that was more said.
Oh, just make something up.
Than anything during the cycle. Everything went perfect. That was fantastic.
God bless you. That was excellent. It's like, oh, but I didn't bring those lyrics. Just make something up. Yeah, okay, I'll make something up. I can do that, you know.
That was good. That was really good. I mean, it's nice to be part of this kind of creative experience.
Beautiful.
Beautiful.
On my own, hour after hour, sipping cocktails and reading Schopenhauer, living in a world without imagination. I see that hope is a lack of information. I turn my back, I shut the door, I lock the key.
a prisoner in my home, but it's lovely to be free.
Goodbye to you, my trusted friend. We've known each other since we were 9 or 10. Together we've climbed hills and trees, learned of love and ABC, skinned our hearts and skinned our knees. Goodbye, my friend, it's hard to die when all the birds are singing in the sky. Now that the spring is in the air, pretty girls are everywhere. Think of me and I'll be there. We had joy, we had fun, we had seasons in the sun, but the hills that we climbed were just seasons out of time. Goodbye, Papa, don't pray for me. I was the black sheep of the family. You tried to teach me right from wrong. Too much wine and too much song, wonder how I got along. Goodbye, Papa, it's hard to die when all the birds are singing in the sky. Now that the spring is in the air, little children everywhere. When you see them, I'll be there. We had joy, we had fun, we had seasons in the sun, but the wine and the song, like the seasons, have all gone. We had joy, we had fun, we had seasons in the sun, but the wine and the song, like the seasons, have all gone. Goodbye, Michelle, my little one. You gave me love and helped me find the sun. And every time that I was down, you would always come around and get my feet back on the ground. Goodbye, Michelle, it's hard to die when all the birds are singing in the sky. Now that the spring is in the air, with the flowers everywhere, I wish that we could both be there. We had joy, we had fun, we had seasons in the sun, but the stars we could reach were just starfish on the beach. We had joy, we had fun, we had seasons in the sun, but the stars we could reach were just starfish on the beach.
As you lie there and listen to my voice, you know that I am your friend, and so you can rest now. You will listen to my voice, and you will remember everything I say, because you know we love you, we want you, and we need you, and your family is very proud of you. You will listen to my voice, and you will rest quietly. You can do everything I tell you, and remember everything I tell you. You know we love you, and we want you, and we need you, and you are safe in our care. So when you are happy, we are proud of you. All children stop something to wash themselves, because everyone looks so good when they are clean. And you are clean and careful, because you want to be clean. How nice you look, and how proud everyone is of you. New toys look so nice, and new clothes look nice. And you like to help by keeping your things as nice and clean as they should be. And the best way to keep your things that way is to always put your things away than you are through playing with them. You can be real proud of yourself and real proud that your things are nice and clean and always put away. Then everyone will know that you are growing up. Yes, you can be sure that when you pick up your things and try to keep yourself clean, that you are helping. You are growing up. You are happy that you can help. You are so happy you are growing up. You like growing up. Everyone has things they like very much, and you do too. And when everyone sees how well you keep your toys and things, your whole family will be proud of you. Yes, proud that you can do all the things they want you to. You will be happy.